Plan Commission meeting of October 26, 2021 to order. Roll call, please.
Anna here.
Sullivan here.
Lorick here. Bukevich here.
Guzikowski here.
Oldani here.
Super here.
Chandler here.
Okay, that will get us to approval of the minutes of October 12th, 2021. Commissioners, if you'd all take a look. And if you have any questions, comments, corrections, or errors, please bring it to our attention. If not, we will entertain a motion.
Super moves to approve the minutes of October 12th, 2020.
Commissioner Seifert, your microphone is not on.
Brett, you got to turn the mic on. There you go.
Sorry about that. Seifert moves to approve the minutes of October 12th, 2021 meeting.
Oldani seconds.
Roll call beginning with Commissioner Hanna.
And I.
Sullivan aye.
Lorick abstains. Bukevich aye.
Guzikowski aye. Oldani aye.
Seifert aye.
Chandler, I.
Item 4 is significant common council actions. We've had none to report to you. 5 is Board of Housing and Zoning Appeal actions. There were also none taken over the last 2 weeks. And that will get us to 6, our quarterly Parks and Recreation Commission actions. Lori, if you would.
Sure. The Parks and Recreation Commission made the recommendation to the Common Council to hire a PRA architecture firm to oversee the design process of the Abishine Beer Garden project. And the next meeting will be held tomorrow night at 6 p.m. We're going to have our second design workshop.
Great. Thank you, Lori. And that will get us to our first public hearing of the night. That is a TID project plan amendment, and it is for proposed plan amending amendments for tax increment districts 7, 8, 10, 13, and 16. And with us tonight is our comptroller as well as our city administrator. So, Max, you going to take it from here, or where are we starting now? Carrie? You want to, got to read it in the record, I guess, for anything.
Sure. So this is an official notice of public hearing for the City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin Plan Commission. Please take notice that a public hearing will be held at 6 p.m. or thereafter on October 26, 2021 in the Common Council chambers of the Oak Creek Civic Center, which is the City Hall, 8040 South 6th Street, Oak Creek, Wisconsin, 53154 by the City of Oak Creek Plan Commission. The purpose of this hearing is to review and consider proposed project plan amendments to 5 tax increment districts, TIDs, as outlined in the notice below. TID number 7, amendment to add $950,000 in new capital improvements located within 1/2 mile of the district boundary with no increase in the previously authorized level of total district expenditures. TID number 8, an amendment to increase the overall level of district expenditures by $25,829,400 for capital improvements, land acquisition, and cash grants that may be provided by the city to owners, lessees, or developers of property within the proposed TID number 8, as well as to donate up to $6,800,000 to TID number 13. TID number 10 is an amendment to donate up to $3,600,000 to TID number 13, with no increase in the previously authorized level of total district expenditures. TID number 13 is an amendment to increase the overall level of district expenditures by $81,037,600 and add project costs for capital improvements, including those within 1/2 mile of the district, as well as cash grants that may be provided to the city by the city to owners, lessees, or developers of property within proposed TID 13. And TID number 16 is an amendment to increase the overall level of expenditures by $22,940,700 and add project costs for capital improvements and cash grants that may be provided by the city to owners, lessees, or developers of property within the proposed TID 16, as well as to donate up to $12 million to TID number 13. Interested parties will be afforded a reasonable opportunity to express their views on the proposed amendments at the public hearing. Copies of the proposed project plans are available on the city's website at the link provided, and will be provided upon request at the offices of the city clerk at the Oak Creek Civic Center, City Hall, 8040 South 6th Street, Oak Creek, Wisconsin, Monday through Friday between the hours of 7:30 a.m. and 4 p.m. Any persons with questions regarding the proposed project plans may call the planning department at 414-766-7000. Dated the 6th day of October, 2021, Catherine Roski, City Clerk, City of Oak Creek, published in the Oak Creek Now. The publication date was October 13th, 2021. This is a public hearing. However, we shall turn it over to the city administrator and the assistant city administrator, as well as our consultant from Vanderwall and Associates for a presentation.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you. I think you just set a record for the longest public hearing announcement on.
I think for the
Creek
Plan
record.
Commission, that may be the longest one, honestly.
Either way, before we make the calls, we're going to turn it over to our comptroller, our consultant, and of course our city administrator. So Andrew, if you want to start us off.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just to set the stage for the Plan Commission, you know, we're not, we're new faces in front of you. We don't come every meeting, but we have a very critical pathway and a very impactful tax increment financing decisions to make tonight. So to start things off, I'll turn it over very quickly here to Max Gagan, our assistant city administrator, comptroller. Max is going to go over a presentation that we give to the Common Council and the public every year, just to apprise the Plan Commissioners of the current status of our tax increment financing districts. Some of those slides will be a little more elementary, and we know that you may know some of those bits of information like basics of TIF, but we have some public here, and it's just good to reiterate those things in public when we can, the basics. I will then take over the mic again for a few minutes to just talk about the larger strategies at play here. These discussions that we're having with you this evening have been taking place with our leadership team over the course of the last year plus. And this is kind of the culmination of those discussions and a strategy we've arrived at. And then we'll turn it over to Scott Harrigan. Scott is with the firm Vanderwall and Associates, and Scott has worked diligently with us to put together the project plan amendments in front of the Plan Commission tonight, and he'd be happy to give some more specifics as to what amendments are at play for each of the districts, and of course any of us are able to answer any questions you have. So if it pleases you, Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it over to Max Gagan, Assistant City Administrator, Comptroller.
Thank you, City Administrator Vickers. So before you tonight is the annual tax increment district presentation. So what we'll cover is providing an overview of what is tax increment financing. We'll go through the calculation for the 12% test, which is a statutory threshold that no more than 12% of your equalized value can be increment within TID districts. We'll talk about the status of the City of Oak Creek's tax increment districts and answer any questions you have. So first, there just want to make a differentiation between what is TIF versus what is TID. We hear those terms used interchangeably at times, but tax increment financing is the actual economic development tool which allows municipalities to expand its property tax base. So that's the actual collection of the money to utilize either for public infrastructure or providing grants or developer incentives. Whereas a tax increment district is the contiguous geographic location where tax increment financing can be utilized. So the easy way to think about it, the TID is the actual location, the TIF is the financing mechanism for the TID. Just looking at a high-level overview of tax increment districts in Wisconsin. So as of April 16th of this year, there was about 1,350 active districts in the state. Of that, 129 are in Milwaukee County. Every city in Milwaukee County has a tax increment district, except 3 villages, Bayside, Fox Point, and River Hills. As of the first of this year, the equalized value of all of the active districts in Wisconsin was $44 billion. And really of note is this is the only meaningful tool available to Wisconsin municipalities in order to effectuate economic development. Also wanted to talk through a couple common misconceptions regarding either TIFs or TIDs. The first being that creating a TID district will increase taxes. So again, a TID district is just the geographic location. It is TIF or tax increment financing, which could be utilized to either do the public investment or incentives. 2, it's a developer's get rich quick scheme. Certainly, a developer has to provide a pro forma and meet what is called the but-for test under state statute, meaning that but for the financial assistance, the project would not move forward. Number 3 being a developer do not pay their taxes, the city gives out free money. The way a tax increment district works is that once a facility is built within that district, that generates additional value. That additional value results in taxes that are paid by the developer, and either those taxes could be utilized to pay off either public investments in infrastructure or potentially a developer incentive or a grant. And lastly, a general taxpayer of the city are negatively impacted by TIDs. I guess the best way I would think of this is a TID is a community's investment in certain areas. So as the districts open, the community is investing either in the infrastructure or in that business. And then when the district closes, we all realize the benefits of that district by expanding the overall property tax base. And by expanding the property tax base, we're essentially taking our property tax levy, shifting it over a greater number of parcels of greater value. So a basic understanding of tax increment financing, you start with a base value. So the base value is the value of the property before the tax increment district's created. We'll create a tax increment district, and then the increment value is any value that is generated above that base value. So an example we'll use is, say a parcel has $0 in value. We create a tax increment district, and it constructs a building on there of $15 million. The full tax revenue for that would be $326,100, and the city's portion of that would be $94,950. But if that property is in a tax increment district, the city collects 100% of the taxes created since the inception of the district in order to pay for public infrastructure, other grants or developer incentives. And then when that district terminates, the higher tax revenue is then distributed to the other taxing jurisdictions. And just to show this a little bit more as a picture, you'll see on the far left, you'll see the base value of when a tax increment district's established. You'll see the amount of taxes collected by the different taxing jurisdictions, whether it's a county, a school, or a technical college, municipality. You see that green triangle, those are the additional taxes as the value of that property grows. That green amount would be to the city to help pay for the public infrastructure incentives. And then when the district closes, which is that red vertical line, you'll see that all of the taxing jurisdictions then share in that higher tax revenue. So looking at the history of tax increment districts in the city of Oak Creek, we've had 6 successful districts so far that have closed. The chart on the left, you'll see that of those districts, all of them had a mandatory termination date of 20 years. They all closed early. In fact, half of them have closed within 10 years of the 20-year maximum. So, it's always a balancing act of trying to figure out when you fulfill your project plan versus terminating it early to provide that property tax relief for the entire community. And the chart on the right you'll see is the value that was generated by each of those districts. Certainly, tax increment District 1 generating about $135 million being the most significant of those. Next, just looking at the city's general obligation debt, and what you'll see here is that about 73% of the city's debt is attributed to a tax increment district. So again, in many instances, we issue debt in order to make public investments, and the largest, I would say, would be TID 11, about $45 million, and that is what encompasses Drexel Town Square. So, the city would issue debt to finance the public improvements or developer incentives to then attract the development in the area, and then those rising property values generate tax revenue that helps us pay off the debt over time.
Just to really underscore this point, I think it's really, really critical. The city has invested significantly since about 2010 in the community, in its tax increment districts. That a lot of that investment was resulting in debt issuance in the community. What this chart is showing is that only 2% of our overall tax burden is paid for by the general property tax levy, all the folks in this room and all the folks that live in Oak Creek. Really critical. These TIDs are paying for themselves, and this graph is a great depiction of that fact.
Next, as I mentioned, the equalized value of a new or amended tax increment district plus the increment of existing districts can't exceed 12% of the equalized value. So by state statute, you can't have more than 12% of your equalized value within a tax increment district. And essentially, the reason for this being is that you don't want to have too much of your money tied within a specific geographic location when you still have to provide general programs and services, public safety, parks and recreation. The 12% amount, it's, I guess I would call fictitious, set by state statute. It could be 15, could be 20, but the state says it's 12. And what you'll see is that based off of the latest equalized values released a few months ago is that we have about $660 million in tax increment or value increment, which exceeds that 12% total. And what that means is that the city is not in a position where it can either create a new TID district or amend an existing district and add territory until it goes under that 12% threshold, which we don't believe would occur anytime before about 2030. So it does give us some challenges, but also the silver lining being that it also shows that we've had a lot of recent success in our districts. And specifically TID 16, you'll see increment of about 178,000. That's the Ryan Business Park and the Amazon Fulfillment Center. So a wildly successful district.
I think the last time we were before the Plan Commission was a few years ago when we were amending tax increment districts. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe that percentage was 8 or 9%. So we were well under. Well, what has transpired between now and then? A $172 million building in Amazon. By 3+ times our largest taxpayer in the city of Oak Creek. They do pay taxes every year, just like the rest of us do. And we can talk a little bit more about Amazon, but really that one building at Amazon put us over that 12% test. So we're not really concerned about that statistic. And we actually seeing a silver lining in that. We actually think that without the ability to create new tax increment districts for a period of time, it's a good way to help control the growth in the city of Oak Creek, which is a benefit. And again, it is really a victim of the success of that Amazon development that pushed us over the brink on the 12%.
So from there, I'll provide a status update on all of our active tax increment districts. And for this first slide, I'll kind of illustrate what the different aspects are because future slides will follow this. So you'll see this is tax increment district number 6, which is our Creekside Corporate Park. It's on the east side of the interstate, just north of Ryan Road. It was our oldest active district, created in 2000. It has a mandatory termination date in 2023. It does have some remaining acreage, about 11 acres left of developable area. It has generated about $18.2 million in value since its inception. Financially, it's doing very well, has about $100,000 in its savings account. It doesn't have any debt associated with it and no active districts. And then you'll see the chart at the bottom. The orange amount is the base value, so that's the value when the district was created. And then the blue value is the amounts of additional value it's added over the years. And this district is actually, it's past its expenditure period, so it's one that we anticipate keeping open for another year because it's providing a donation to TID 13 and then have it close 1 year early. TID number 7 is our 27th Street Corridor District, stretches from city limits on the southern end all the way up to Drexel Avenue on the north end, bound by the interstate as well as city limits on the west end. So this district was created in 2007 with a mandatory termination date in 2027. Does have some remaining acres to develop, and it has created about $85.5 million in value. So again, very significant value, and a lot of that value has come actually in the last few years with the development of the Seasons of Orchard Hills project. You'll see a fund balance of about $50,000. It does have almost $6 million in outstanding debt, but those debt is related to 2 investments of public infrastructure. The first being the upgrades to the Drexel Avenue and 27th Street intersection, as well as paying the state's or the city's portion of the Drexel Avenue interchange with the interstate. We do have one active finance development agreement with that for another few years, but again, this district's really turned around in the last few years, is able to support its debt. And what we're asking the Plan Commission tonight is to approve an amendment to utilize some of its excess capacity to pay for some projects within a half mile, specifically to improve roads in the Apple Creek subdivision, plus improvements to the park in that area. TID number 8 is our Oakview Business Park on the south side. That district was created in 2009, maximum termination date in 2029. You'll see it's created over $103 million in value in the last 11 years. It does have a negative fund balance of about $800,000. And what that means is that the city has spent money to invest within the properties within that area. So putting in public infrastructure or incentives, but that amount will be recuperated over time through the taxes from the development. And looking at the latest cash flow projection, this district's actually on pace to be cash flow positive by the end of 2022. And even if the Plan Commission were to approve the amendments we're requesting tonight, it would still be cash flow positive in 2022, and we would still be able to close it a year or two early. TID number 10 covers the Master Lot campus. Has been open since 2010. Has some small remaining acreage to be developed. About $22 million in value added since its inception. Positive fund balance about $1 million. And what we're proposing with our amendments is to utilize the positive fund balance here to help facilitate purchase of some property on the lakefront. It doesn't have any outstanding debt. We'll have to keep this district open for another 3 to 4 years. We still have an active finance development agreement with Master Lock, which should be coming to an end about 2024. TID number 11 is Drexel Town Square, created in 2012, terminates in 2032. We do have 11 remaining acres to be developed, but that's really only a few sites. And some of those sites we have contemplated developments on. Has generated about $184 million in value. So our largest increment generating district. Positive fund balance of about $650,000. You'll see about $44 million still in outstanding debt, but based on the latest cash flow, again, we're generating over $4 million a year in taxes to help service that debt. So it's in a very good position to close potentially a year or two early, and it's self-supporting its debt. And you'll see we have 7 active agreements with developments in the area. TID number 12 encompasses IKEA property on the west side of the interstate, and then the Highgate property on the east side of the interstate. So this district was created in 2016, mandatory termination date in 2036. In 2019, it was amended to include all the land on the east side of the interstate. So that's where that orange value kind of goes up in 2020 for the base value. But the increment's been pretty significant, about $56 million since its inception. Very good fund balance, about $2.6 million. It does have about $6.7 million in outstanding debt, but again, based off its latest cash flow projection, should be paying that off within the next few years. We do anticipate this district probably go closer to the fuller term, mid-2030s. TID 13 is our lakefront district, so created in 2017. What you'll see is this is actually a blighted district, so different than the industrial and mixed-use districts the city's historically created, which gives us a 27-year runway for the payback, so a termination date in 2044. Significant remaining acreage to be developed. However, we do have one finance development agreement in place with F Street Group, and that's for the Lakeshore Commons project, so 700 plus units next to Lake Vista Park. Is generating a little bit of increment in fund balance, and it doesn't have any outstanding debt to date, but this is really the target of our TID closure and donation strategy tonight. TID number 14 is at 6th Street and Rawson Avenue. Again, a blighted district. It's a single parcel district, actually. and that parcel is now at its highest and best use. So it had a lot of environmental challenges. It's now built up with a warehouse facility, value about $9 million, a small negative balance, a little bit of debt. But again, this is one that, given the development we've seen there, keeping it open for a few years, that fund balance will turn positive and we'll be able to pay off the debt. TID number 15 is at Drexel Avenue and 6th Street, so across the street where the Aldi development is. Created in 2018, again, as a blighted district. It does have 0 acres remaining available and about value of $4.5 million. We have one active agreement on this as well as a small deficit balance for funds. And then lastly, TID 16, Ryan Business Park, created in 2018. This encompasses the Amazon Fulfillment Center. It does have a maximum termination date in 2038. It does have remaining acres to be developed, about 34 acres, but it's generated $177 million in value since its inception. Has a positive fund balance, about $100,000. We've got about $2 million in debt we have to pay off. We do have some active agreements, and based off latest cash flow projections, that Amazon Fulfillment Center's value is well overperforming initial projections, where that district could close anywhere from 8 to 9 years from now, when the initial projection was about 15 to 20. So very good success story for the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have on just tax increment districts as a whole or specific finances in our districts.
We'll get to that at the public hearing with the council or the commission.
Sounds good, Mr. Mayor. I'll just talk a little bit about the higher level strategy here. And again, we've been working on this with our leadership team, with the elected officials for the better part of 2021. And with having Max come on board, Max was able to bring a lot of this into clarity for us from a financial standpoint, and really helped the city arrive at this strategy of TID donation. But just a high-level summary of what we're kind of discussing this evening. First goal we had is to really update the current and past project costs as we've known and implemented them in several of our tax increment districts, essentially updating the financial record. A great example of this is when this group and the Joint Review Board and the Common Council all approved the Ryan Business Park Tax Increment District a few years ago, we didn't know exactly what was going to be coming on the property. We were in discussions at an early phase with Amazon, but that was certainly not a business deal we had reached. We had an estimate for infrastructure numbers, and we now know that the infrastructure numbers for the 13th and Ryan improvements, as well as the creation of Bartell Court, came in at $20.8 million. Amazon fronted 100% of that $20.8 million for the cost for that infrastructure, and the city for a period of time will return the tax dollars that they pay in to the tax increment district to repay them for that significant investment. But we had initial estimates. Now we know the major crux of that business park infrastructure development is done. So we're updating that to what we now know to be true, as opposed to speculation and estimation. So several of those project plans are capturing just updates to the costs and the current state of affairs in those districts. Number two, what we're doing is really identifying, parlaying the success of our tax increment districts, which Max just kind of laid out, parlaying that success and identifying and capturing excess increment from our very successful TIDs as a funding source for the continued environmental redevelopment and public amenity development that the city envisions for the lakefront. The lakefront is a significant game changer for our community. We absolutely want to make sure that we do right by the private development that goes in, most specifically the public amenities and the access to the public to the lakefront. But we know that that takes a significant amount of investment. We want to leave some additional project plan capacity in these tax increment district amendments to react to development and other partnership opportunities that present themselves. And then, of course, we want to employ not only a TID donation strategy to capitalize some of the very expensive projects that we have on the lakefront that are required on the lakefront, but that also keeps an eye towards what our ultimate goal is to ultimately close these tax increment districts as soon as possible. And I don't know if you caught it, but Max kind of estimated at each that we could still potentially close these districts early, regardless of amending the amendments before you this evening. And we expect that to be true. Nothing this evening in terms of donation of a performing district to the lakefront will carry any of these tax increment districts by themselves into their full term. So we do expect to close these early, which is important. So some of the larger projects associated, not only did we update what we know, what we've incurred, but what we also know to be strategic into the future, whether that be immediate, medium term or longer term. The city is strategically looking to acquire property. There's two pieces of property that the city is currently under contract to purchase. One being the Oakview Business Park Lot 1, which is the hard corner of Oakwood and Howell Avenue. And the other is the approximate remnant 46 acres on the city's north bluff of the lakefront, which is again the remnant piece of the Peter Cooper Company property. The Peter Cooper property is a significant cost increase to not only obviously the land is one piece of that, but that's part of the continued cleanup of the lakefront. And right now we have a partner, a very good partner of ours in Wispark, who currently owns the property. Wispark is in divestiture mode. They want to liquidate their assets. They're no longer in the development business. And the principal's role there is to divest of property and kind of get it off essentially We Energy's books. So what we're looking at is a piece of property. The city has 46 acres of property on Lake Michigan lakefront under contract for $891,000, less than $1 million. Well, why is it so cheap? It has environmental conditions that need to be rectified in order for public and private development and park-like amenities can be built on it. Wispark, being in divestiture mode, is waiting for the city to use its tax increment financing district dollars to fund the remediation of the property such that we can get it to a redevelopable state and also build some park amenities on that. So we were scratching our head saying, if you're waiting for the city to invest in the environmental remediation via its tax increment district, I think we would rather be on the receiving end of the property and control the fate of what goes in that property versus that being a private development function. So I hope that makes sense. Really controlling our own destiny on the lakefront has been very strategic for us. Thinking about this last year and putting pen to paper. The other piece, Oakview Business Park Lot 1, this group is very familiar with all of the development going on in Oakview. You're also very familiar that Oakview has become something that we maybe hadn't intended it to be in total, and there's a lot of logistics and warehousing. Logistics and warehousing buildings have their purpose. Obviously, with online commerce and things never going away, that's very critical to the commerce and economy of local, state, and federal federally. So what we're doing here, and again, this is kind of a global settlement because Wispark currently owns Lot 1 too. So we're kind of getting Wispark strategically out of ownership of properties in the city, and the city is taking control and ownership of those. We have a very patient approach to Oakview Lot 1. We're looking at a potential partnership to combine Oakview Lot 1 with 25 acres to the south of that to have one cohesive 40-acre parcel, which is actually pretty rare in Milwaukee County, and the city will control and be very patient to make sure it gets those family-sustaining manufacturing jobs that we did envision for the bulk of Oakview Business Park to be. So a patient approach, finding the right business headquarters, manufacturing company to come in over time. And if it's not tomorrow, if it's not 5 years from now, if it's not 10 years from now, we're very much fine with that. We need to get the right development and business on that corner. As Max had mentioned, one of the subject TIDs amendments is TID 7. That expenditure period is coming up to a close in April of 2022. So with some of the additional funds, we set out to do some additional capital projects, and namely to repave Apple Creek subdivision, maybe rework some of the medians on Hanadell Boulevard to a more maintenance-friendly state, and then add a park-like amenity on the parcel that shares the water tower in the Apple Creek subdivision. So again, the major crux of this discussion is the handling of the continued environmental cleanup, redevelopment, and public park development on the lake. Not only do we have the environmental costs that we're subscribing to with the Peter Cooper property, the city owns 23 acres immediately adjacent to the east of the Peter Cooper property that serves as the bluff of the lake. We came into ownership on that property in, I believe, 2015. It was parceled off from the larger Peter Cooper property. And what we have is a situation where we have an unstable bluff, not uncommon in Great Lakes communities to have unstable bluffs, but there's environmental contamination on the bluff. So we have to spend a significant amount of money, ethically and legally and otherwise, to make sure that that bluff is stable and the contaminants are contained. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to stabilize a bluff? Think really big rocks to break up the wave action at the base of the bluff. The wave action erodes the bottom of the bluff over time, and that weakens the top of the bluff. So the thought behind this strategy is, do we want to approach the community? Do we want to approach the Plan Commission and the Common Council with a $9 million project to put big rocks at the base of a bluff? Or would we like to approach the community and the Common Council and the Plan Commission with a incrementally larger project, yes, say 12 or $13 million, and have public access to the bluff via the lakefront? And that's kind of the idea. Not only are we going to stabilize the bluff from the environmental responsibility, but bring the public to some sort of a walking promenade where they can access Lake Michigan at the lake. And most importantly, find a way for connective vision and connective tissue to connect the city's North Bluff with the parts in between to Lake Vista Park, and then ultimately all the way down to Bender. The funding vehicle that's being enabled this evening allows for those significant investments in that lake to make it truly a regional asset that we'll all be proud of for generations. We don't know exactly what that vision is yet. The Common Council in its proposed budget for 2022 included spending $80,000 to hire a consultant to help the community, help the staff, help the stakeholders and decision makers vision out, well, what do we mean by a really cool park? What kind of features are you talking about? Really, all we do know is that we're not just going to put big rocks at the base of the bluff and call it a day. We're going to make that an asset. And the main crux of this discussion, bringing it all full circle, is, but for the TIF amendments before us this evening, we don't have the capacity as a community. This tax increment district 13 on the lake doesn't have the capacity to handle these extraordinary costs to clean up contaminated property. It's a brownfield site, and invest in that community, invest in those community assets. We certainly don't think our general taxpayers should be investing to the tune of, maybe $20 million over the next several years in their general property taxes. So we've created a strategy that allows, again, for our successful TIDs to create increment flow to the tax increment district that serves as the lakefront and handle those costs. These are not costs, these are extraordinary costs that don't generate increment. We have the Lakeshore Commons, we have a single family subdivision being planned to the south. We have a lot of increment in those districts forthcoming and underway, specifically with Lakeshore Commons. But those developments don't generate increment to the tune of an excess of $15, $20, $23 million to be able to handle these environmental costs. And although we're great partners in the development community, no developer has stepped forward and wanted to gift us the $12 million necessary to stabilize the bluff and build at least the first phase of our park vision out there. So the question is, do we want, without these TID amendments, we're back to where we were a year ago, scratching our heads saying, well, maybe we can get around and do the rest of the things we really should and want to do on the lakefront? Or should we use the taxes being paid by the developers that have been successful in our community for the past several years to fund that as opposed to our general taxpayers? And that's the crux of the amendments before you. The main thrust is really capitalizing the lakefront. So with that, I'll briefly turn it over to Scott Harrington with Vanderwall and Associates. He can give you just the finer particulars on each of the tax increment district amendments, and we can certainly pause for questions.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, everybody. Just a couple final little overview parts. I know we've kind of waiting, okay, why are we here? Why are we here? So when you create a TIF district, you kind of set certain parameters. What's the boundary? What kind of TIF is it? Basically, how long is it going to last? You kind of project your costs. You project your increment. You have to show that the TIF pays for itself. And so within that, there's some flexibility. You can switch projects up, that you can spend more on this one, less on that one. But there's a couple of things that you're held to that if you want to change, you have to go through an amendment process. So that's really why we're here tonight, is that we're making the changes that do require an amendment. And the amendment process is quite lengthy. We have to convene the joint review board. We have to hold this public hearing. We have to have the common council vote on it. And then we have to go back to the joint review board to affirm the common council action. So this is why we're kind of save them all up for one shot rather than kind of peppering you and the joint review board with these things all year, was to kind of do it together. Plus the fact that 4 out of these 5 are directly related to TID 13 and making donations to it and amending TID 13 to increase the spending plan to address the issues that Andrew had. So that's just kind of a quick overview of how this ended up all together. So let's start with TID number 7. This is the one amendment that doesn't have anything to do with TID 13. As mentioned before, the spending plan's about up. There's some subdivision improvements needed within that subdivision that's completely surrounded by the district. And so one of the things the TID law permits are expenditures within 1/2 mile if they're explicitly called out for in the plan. So we're explicitly calling them out. Not all the funds or projects that were in the original project plan have been undertaken. So there's room in the spending plan to accommodate this expense without having to raise the spending limit. When you set your project plan, you kind of lock yourself into, we're not going to spend more than X dollars without having to do an amendment. In this case, we don't have to change that number, but we do have to amend this TIF to include these expenditures within 1/2 mile. TID 8, this is one where a lot of money's already been spent in the rapid growth that was really not initially anticipated. So in some extent, we're really kind of playing catch up. So a big chunk of this 25 million, frankly, has already been committed. It's not new expenditure. It's really kind of getting our books in order for work, much of which has already been done. Plus then being able to, as part of that, donating 6.8 million to TID 13. And all of that can be done and still close this district probably like 6 years early. So we're not overtaxing, if you will, the district and its ability to pay for these things. We're just getting our house in order with expenditures, because our revenue likewise is also way beyond what was originally anticipated, and then using some of the surplus to assist with these extraordinary costs in TID 13. In TID 10, strictly a donation of 3.6 million to TID 13. Some of the projects initially anticipated were not undertaken, so this can be done within the spending level previously authorized. This TIF also has about $1 million sort of in the bank, in the cash, in its fund balance. And so this is a big chunk of that funding needed to close on those property transactions that Andrew mentioned that are already under contract by shifting that money over. And then the other 2.6 will come over in the next few years, but this still would be able to close about 2 to 3 years early. So it's well within the capability of the district to handle this donation. The lakefront TIF, Andrew kind of covered the bigger costs there. Really, when you kind of look at what's in the amendment for expenditures, all of those really were in the original project plan. It's just the cost estimates were way under what is actually turned out to be in reality. But likewise, the amount of development potential has also increased significantly. And so these donations will really help kind of with the cash flow of the TIF to kind of jumpstart it. The development coming behind will really be able to then carry a lot of the debt and possibly get this closed early with the great projections that that Max has put together. This TIF could close with an $18 million fund balance. So the donations are as much about cash flow as they are about total dollars. And again, this is that list of improvements. We can kind of go over this in more detail if folks have questions.
Just real quickly on that, Scott, if I could, because I think this underscores the point we were making earlier. A year ago, we had no idea. If you look at the far right column, we had no idea on several of those projects. That was 2000 question mark, 2020 question mark. We had no idea. This strategy came into focus, and we were actually able to put a timeline to those major projects at the lake, very transformative and aspirational projects. We were actually able to put a timeline to them. And this is actually wrapped up in a funding plan in your TID amendment paperwork, where this pays for itself. And as Scott said, $18 million of potential excess increment at the end of it. Again, critical. We were really scratching our heads like, man, we have all this cool stuff we want to do. We have this environmental remediation we need to do. But for these series of amendments this evening, we have no timeline on how we would accommodate those larger projects.
Great. And again, a lot of these really facilitate not only the public access, but private development on a big chunk of that property that, given its location, should be very prime and generate pretty significant values. And then lastly, TID 16, or kind of the Amazon TIF or Ryan Business Park, again, just need to kind of catch up with the overall level of expenditures. And this would also include a donation of $12 million up to TID 13. So again, these donations, other than the $1 million I mentioned previously for TID 10, these are contributions over time. And as you see in the cash flow charts with each one of these plans, typically that amount builds. So it's not like, hey, here's $12 million. It's a revenue stream that totals out to $12 million over the next several years. But even with that, we're still looking at the potential of closing TID number 16, up to 6 years early. So if we left it open, there would be even more there. But the city has an excellent track record of really trying to close districts early, kind of move them on. And when that happens, as mentioned before, all that tax value then gets added to the full tax roll, really reduces the impact to all the taxpayers. So that's the reason why we want to kind of move these out of the TIF as soon as possible. So that's a quick overview of the 5 specific amendments. The schedules, I mentioned quite a few meetings. We already had a meeting with the Joint Review Board just to introduce the topic, answer some questions. We have this public hearing tonight. The Plan Commission has 5 resolutions in front of it that'll be asked to take action on, making recommendations to the Common Council, who would then have their own 5 resolutions to consider on November 16th. And then we're reconvening the Joint Review Board on November 17th to pass their 5 resolutions affirming the action taken by the council. So I think we're done.
Great. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. That was a wealth of information, quite a bit there. We will now continue on with the public hearing. So anybody wishing to speak, this is a public hearing. Please approach podium, give your name and address. This will be the first call. Second call, anybody wishing to speak on the topic, please approach podium, give your name and address. And third and final call on the public hearing for 7A. Anybody wishing to speak, again, please give your name and address.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one, we will close the public hearing on 7A and go on to Item 9A in the agenda, for consideration and review of the Plans Commission to amend those TIF districts. So I will now open up to the commission for questions, comments. Anything, Christine?
Yes, I do have a question / comment. So it's going to kind of sound a little bit confusing because it is confusing for me. So the TID that you're going to be using the funds to pay for the brownfield cleanup. Once you do that, you said that I don't know how many acres that was, but you're going to be using this fund for cleaning up, and afterwards, all of this acre is going to be used. Some of it for like public promenade or whatever other public entities to be used. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the rest of it is going to be open for private developers to come, for example, put more housing similar to the one by the park. I can't recall the name now, but yes. So is it going to be used this way? So if I'm understanding this correctly, we're going to use it to make more private homes versus opening for public usage?
No, it's actually going to be a balance of that. So the city already owns 23 acres on the North Bluff. That's subject to the stability issue we talked about, and a lot of that, along with very much some additional property of the Peter Cooper property, formerly to the west, inland a bit, which is adjacent to our bluff, could very well be used for park-like development as well. Certainly, though, with the investment the city is making in the Peter Cooper property, which it already has in the North Bluff piece, which was part of it, there's certainly going to be private development activity. The city, the Plan Commission, the council, the planning staff have not determined what type of development is appropriate, what density, what land use is appropriate for that northern parcel. But we wanted to be able to determine that versus the developer who owned the property, and that's really the crux of us wresting away out of the developer's hands that property, so we can control what the fate of it is, as opposed to having to react. You have to react to development plans a lot, and a lot of times they're not perfect, and we just want to be in the driver's seat of that conversation. And we will be very, very patient on that as well. Contrary to popular belief here, we are not trying to develop everything in Oak Creek overnight and in the next 5 or 10 years. There's a lot of activity. The market is speaking. It wants to be here. A lot of investment in the community. We're trying to control that growth. This is certainly one way to say, it's a great piece of property. They don't grow land on Lake Michigan very often, and we know what we have, so we will be patient for the exact right type of a development for the community in the long term.
What is it going to be zoned for? What is the zoning for that property?
On that one.
Sure. Doug Seymour, Director of Community Development. It's a big district. It runs all the way from Bender Park all the way up to north to the MST property. So they're a good mix of zonings. There'll be commercial zoning along, and I don't know if we can bring up that TID 7 map and kind of explains it a little bit better. But the areas along, for instance, the intersection of State Highway 32 and State Highway 100 will probably be commercial property. The areas south of Bender Park and adjacent to Bender Park probably be residential zoning. The area, for instance, with Lakeshore Commons, that's kind of a hybrid zoning that allows both, and this type of traditional neighborhood planning and development, which the Planning Commission approved. What's going to happen on the North Bluff? And that, I guess, remains to be seen, but if we were to Andrew's point, if we were to leave that to the market, the pressure would be such to dispose of that in the quickest way possible, in the one that meets the market today. And today, or when it's cleaned up, that might be manufacturing, and staff, and certainly the council and the administration has been very upfront that we're not comfortable investing all this money in a community vision only to have those properties go back into a manufacturing zoning like they were 50 years ago. And that's where, to Andrew's point, we wanted to be in the driver's seat, wanted to control our own destiny because we are patient. We are patient capital. Whereas an owner of property needs to turn that over in order to realize their investment on that property. And we have, I guess, the luxury of being a little more patient and waiting for the right project.
Correct. And my concern in all of this, and I'm not sure who I'm speaking with,
Sure.
is just if we use it for the future to make it residential and we, after paying all this debt money, use it for this environmental cleanup, is going to be used by a private developer, and all this public access and should be part of the public usage.
Oh, it definitely will be. And I can,
That's just my concern.
I will commit to you today, and I'm sure the mayor and every member of the council will commit to you that, whatever happens along that lakefront, public access and the public's use of the lakefront is priority number one.
And I think that's evident in Lake Vista. The very first thing we did was open that up to public access. Just a brief comment. There was a lot of information shared here, and there was a lot of numbers and a lot of things going on. This is a very, very strategic plan. And we are really blessed to be in this position to be able to do this. And this only comes about from previous investment in TIFs and well-managed TIFs that we can do this. So to put this down in layman's terms, this is very much what people do when they did smart things like invest it in their homes and then decided to reinvest at a lower interest rate or pull equity out to maybe buy an income property, something like that. That is a reward for being smart financially, and that's essentially what the city's doing here. Now, we're given rules by the state on when we can do this, when the windows close, and what we can do. And we have to invest into the infrastructure, and I'll use TIF 7 as an example of that. We're going to improve amenities in the Apple Creek subdivision there. We have an opportunity to improve roads, parks, things of that nature. That's an investment we normally, if we were to do that, we would ask the general public to do it. We're not doing that. These districts are paying for that, and that was evident in that big wheel graph they showed before. So, we have a very rare opportunity here, and we are really blessed to be in this kind of position, just the way we've handled our TIFs over the years. So, this investment in the lakefront, again, what goes down there in the end, the important thing is we have to prepare it for what's coming down there. And Andrew talked about just cleaning up the land value on the bluff or the land. We do have some issues with the land there. And the condition of the soil. If it goes down to the lake and that bluff continues to erode, we're going to have some serious problems. So, as Andrew said, we can basically create a break wall and help control that, or we can really open that up to the amenity of the public and harness our great investments in other TIDs to help finance that and open that up to the lake and enhance what Christine's talking about. So. This is a very rare position to be in, and kudos to Max and Andrew and Vanderwall for coming up with this, because very rarely do you get an opportunity to basically refinance like this and really reap the benefits of what you did. So just a little comment there. So.
Okay, one final question here. I don't know where it fits in all of this, but when we're doing all of those TID revenues and amendment, and all of those infrastructure that needs to be maintained, I'm reading what I wrote here. So, what is the impact on private residents in the area neighborhood that we are putting all of those big infrastructure in those TID section or segments, or however you want to call it? Has it been ever looked at, considered?
Are you speaking those within the TID, like for instance, Lakeshore Commons?
Or even Amazon, let's pick on Amazon.
Sure. Yeah.
So the residential area neighborhood, north, south, east, west. So even though it generates a good revenue that we can use it to pay off debts or maintaining other facilities, public facilities, but what is the impact on the neighborhood residents?
So maybe I can take a real quick stab at that. TID does not define land use. So in the vast majority of cases, for instance, the Amazon and the Ryan Business Park were shown as a mix of commercial and industrial in our future land use plan. The TID was just a means of realizing that private investment. The TID didn't necessarily make wholesale changes to the land use in that area. So from the perspective of the people who lived within the district, and there were probably 3 or 4 houses, are adjacent to the district. Any changes to the land use would actually come through this body, and the common council will be a public hearing. And in the vast majority of cases, and there probably are a few that could change some land use, and probably Drexel Town Square was one of those. I mean, it really did not have an impact on the use. It was just a means, again, of stimulating investment in those properties and that district that was already zoned for that and was already planned for that in the comprehensive plan.
There was no rezoning, for example, on the Oakwood Parkway, I believe it's called, on Oakwood Road.
Oakview?
Yes. Oakwood.
I mean, a good portion of that was called for manufacturing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Christine?
Yeah.
Matt, coming your way.
I have no further comments. You covered my comments, and any questions I had, Christine was on top of them. Thank you.
Alderman, thank you, Matt. Alderman Lark?
I know we went over a big chunk of this presentation at the last council meeting. I think between that and the rest of the presentation today, all my questions have been answered. So, and I know we'll get another shot at the next council meeting on this. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Don?
My questions are more for clarification and making sure I understand this correctly. So the bluffs, the city owns a chunk of the bluffs to the north of the existing park, Lake Vista. The rest is currently owned by, I'm sorry, who was that owned by again? Park. Okay. So the plan is to purchase this land before the cleanup begins? Is that the plan on that?
So if we're moving, let's start with Lake Vista. The connective tissue to Bender Park to the south will be a future conversation, but let's start with Lake Vista. Lake Vista had a bluff at one point, and it had a lot of private industrial development, legacy of environmental contamination. Over the last decade, the city worked with the property owners, worked with the EPA, worked with the DNR to get a clean bill of health on that property and have institutional controls in place for how that property is developed and how the integrity of those environmental conditions are left intact over time. So, for instance, we had a bluff, we created some switchbacks and some walkways down, we created Lake Vista Park. We are where we were probably not 10 or 12 years ago, but maybe 8 or 10 years ago, on the north piece, the same spot we found ourselves in when we started thinking and investing in the area that is now Lake Vista Park and the area that's Lakeshore Commons. So we're running the same playbook. We're just at a different parallel.
But the land that's not owned by the city right now, have we already invested in any kind of cleanup on that?
Not the land that's not owned by the city, no. Okay. No, the remnant 46 acres that we're acquiring now, we have not invested any cleanup effort in partnership with West Park.
I mean, but that's the land we want to secure at some point, so we have control. I'm assuming there's not a whole lot of interest in anybody buying that other than the city at this point.
So like I mentioned, correct, right? The city being patient capital that we are, we came to a crossroads with West Park. They said, hey, we have about, anywhere between $4 to $6 million of cleanup. We have $2 million into the property already, whatever the math is. Listen, until the district can cover the gap of the environmental, we're not cleaning it up and it's going to stay where it is. No, that's not because they're bad people or bad developers. That's just the economics of it. I mean, they couldn't get approval to spend that kind of money, right?
Understood.
So we said, well, if you're waiting for the city to come in with its TIF tool and clean up the property anyway, why would we let you be holding the asset that we improved in the end of it? So we're taking their place in the venture.
Yeah. Right. I guess that's the way I understood it. Is there a timeline and when taking that over would be, or is that the patient part?
No. So actually the subject amendment to tax increment district number 10, the master lock, Scott had mentioned, and maybe Max did as well. We're actually using a one-time sweep of that fund balance and donating that to the lake. And that is to be used for the purchase. So we're not taking out debt for the pure property.
Okay, great. That's exactly what I was looking for. So thank you. And then one more question here. Cleaning up the bluffs for possible access, this would be before any development of the unpurchased land. Those are adjacent to each other, correct? And that's possible, clean up one portion, use it, people on it, while the adjacent part is still not clean or in the process of being cleaned up?
So the real issue with the North Bluff is the stability of the bluff. The city, with its regulatory partners, has invested significantly in that North Bluff to stabilize the top portion of it. There was contaminants on the top. Those are capped. Well, we thought we had given where lake levels were when we acquired the property in 2015, all of the experts said, in the distant future, that's relative, but in say 15 or 20 years, if water levels continue to rise at the rate they're rising, you're probably going to have some stability issues with the bluff and you're going to have to do something about it. So we had a long runway. Well, we all know what lake levels have risen feet in the last 5 years, and it really hit us in the nose a lot sooner than we had anticipated.
And I get that, the whole stability thing, that's big, and the rocks are, I think, the most common way to do that. Just the adjacent land that would still be contaminated, I just want to make sure that you can have people on there without getting too close to where it's still contaminated, being worked on, being kicked up, whatever. That's my only concern.
Yes,
you have that both happening at the same time.
Yeah. So before we do anything with that property, if the community, if the council stakeholders said, "Hey, we don't want to do any private development. We want to have 60 acres be all parkland on Lake Michigan," I think that would be a mistake. But we would still need to clean up to a standard acceptable to DNR to allow public access, even if it's for a public reason. But certainly the litmus test and the standard of remediation is a lot higher given a redevelopment activity that you'd want to undertake on any portion of that.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Sure.
Fred?
I have a question. Isn't the original owner of that property or the businesses who created this contamination held responsible for the cleanup and the cost for that mediation? You go back a few years, and I'm talking in the early 50s, I remember stuff oozing out of the bluffs along the lakefront. And there's a lot of contamination on that property. And I think people don't even know what it is yet and what it really will cost to clean it up. Therefore, I think we should try to get the original owners who created the problem should pay for that cleanup, at least not the city.
So we have a really good handle on what's there, actually. We've been studying that. West Park obviously did their due diligence before they came into ownership of the property in 2015. The 23 acres that serves as the bluff plus that the city came into ownership is really dealing with similar issues. It was all one parcel for one, I guess a series of factories over time, but the glue factory specifically. The city is, just to be clear, the city is not paying for the remediation in the traditional sense of the folks behind me and you. The tax increment financing district will pay for that remediation. Your point is very well taken, though. I don't think we can get too far into this, but prior to a year ago and prior to arriving at that strategy, it's probably been about a year, we initiated what's called a cost recovery action to subrogate those responsibilities down to the former title holders of the property. Now, they have to have assets 75 years later for us to get, or an operative insurance policy in play at the time. So we are turning over those stones as well, but we're not finding anywhere in the chain of title where we're going to come up with 100% of the costs that it would take to really get this back to a public state or a redevelopment state. But we are going down that road. We've been down that journey for about a year, maybe a little more than a year already.
You have an idea of what the contaminant really is that's in the ground and what it really would cost to clean it up?
Yes, we do. Right now we have many years of due diligence done by West Park when they thought they were going to be redeveloping the property kind of as an investment. We have all of their data. Before we consummate the land transaction and come into ownership, we will not only verify their information, but of course do our own due diligence on the property so we know exactly what we're looking at from a liability standpoint, as well as what it's going to cost to, redevelop or remediate the environmental conditions. And a lot of that dovetails into what is it that you want to do with the property. I don't know that this property needs to be residential or it should be something else. For instance, the Lakeshore Commons project to the south that we recently announced and approved, that because there were residential land uses allowed on that, had to be remediated to a much higher standard than, say, if we wanted to just do an industrial development on that property. Now, we didn't spend all of this time and money and effort over the last 20 years to restore the lakefront, as Doug had mentioned, and have big industry out there again. So that's really not our goal, but for that North Bluff property, that's really for the community, you folks, to help fashion in a vision for what we want to do with that property in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Chauncey?
Can you provide a little more information on why there was an increase in expenditures for TID 8 and 16?
Sure. TID 8 is the Oakview Business Park. TID 8 allows for, really the amendment allows for three things. It does four things. The first thing it does is updates our current cost of infrastructure that and incentives that we've put into the park, the business park. Secondly, it provides for essentially a budget of expenditures to purchase Lot 1, to purchase the 25 acres south of Lot 1, and to provide a donation to the lakefront TID 13. So those are really the principal cost increases of TID 8. TID 16 is the Ryan Business Park, which features Amazon. In a nutshell, what Amazon is doing, or what cost increases are there. I don't know exactly what was in the original project plan. Maybe Scott has that handy. But again, the infrastructure investment made by Amazon was actually $20.8 million. I don't think we ever fathomed that that Ryan Road, 13th Street, and Bartel Court would ever cost $20.8 million plus interest. But we've updated that. And of course, the other big expenditure is donating up to $12 million to the TID number 13, which is the lakefront. So those costs that became known or as part of the strategy have increased the original cost in the project plan for those two.
So, to my understanding, with the increase in expenditures or spending, that would impact the TID itself. So are those expenditures paid for?
Yeah, so in whether...
And not the donation, but everything else.
Yep. So what you have to provide or demonstrate, whether you're creating a new district or amending a district, is that whatever it is that your expenditure plan is financially feasible given your revenues. So, I mean, I think I'm answering your question right. On the lakefront, can we spend $117 million of project costs and not have this donation strategy in place? No, we cannot. Can Lakeshore Commons, the development that we've already locked in the single family development that you'll probably see over the next year or two to the south, can they pay for the additional environmental costs? No, they can pay for themselves. They can contribute cash flow because they pay for themselves plus to the overall district, but not to the tune of the millions of dollars for the remediation that's required at the lake.
And the reason I ask that, because what I'm trying to understand is how these TIDs in particular can make a donation if their costs are increasing, just to make sure everything is covered in that instance.
Sure.
So if you, the back of every TID plan is a cash flow projection. And so all of the costs are accounted for in there. So what the first column in each of those tables are the expenditures to date. So here's all the money and all the money that's been spent, all the taxes that have been collected since the TIF was created through the end of last year. And then we show year by year going forward what additional expenditures there will be and what additional revenue that there will be. And I think all the cases but one, all the additional revenue is based on development that's already on the ground or been approved. So we're not, crossing our fingers and hoping other development shows up. The development that's already on the ground, the value that's on the ground is already there. So, barring the tax rate dropping dramatically by you or the school district, which is probably very unlikely, at least to any huge extent, then we're pretty well assured of those revenues. And so all these districts pay for themselves. They're all financially feasible. All of them are closing early and closing with a positive fund balance. And, if need be, could stay open a little bit longer if they were still a little behind. So yes, we show in the cash flow projection that they can pay all these additional expenses, including the donation. So in both those cases, like in TID 16, we're increasing the level expenditure by about 23 million, but 12 million of that is the donation. That's not on top of that, that's part of that. So there's about 10 million in other expenditures related primarily to Amazon that are beyond what was initially envisioned when the TIF was created. But Amazon is more than paying back all of that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chris? Nothing? Nothing. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Don.
I'm sorry, I have to ask this question. So it seems feasible. We know what the rewards are. So what are the risks of this? Assuming everything gets, approved. Global catastrophe? No. I was going to say, short of an economic crash and, crumbling, but, we don't want to go there. And that could happen. But, what we make sure we don't do is hyperextend ourselves too early. And as Scott, listen, we are incredibly conservative with these estimations, with the tax rates. We have assumed in most cases zero inflationary growth in property value or something less than 2%. We take these decisions on an iterative basis. And if in 3 years from now, we're looking to move on to maybe the $5 million cleanup project that we've been planning, and we're going to look at all this again and make sure that project still makes sense, not just go based on what assumptions we made today. But I think most importantly, as Scott had mentioned, we are Oakview Business Park. We're not saying, great example. We're not saying, well, we're going to get another Amazon in there and it's 172 million, so we can make sure it looks great on paper. What we have is already in the ground or under contract. The land's already been transacted. So we are not at all very speculative on the types of development that that we don't already know. We're not saying.
Great points, because if you notice on those maps, those cross-hatched areas, those are all areas that were still remaining available for development. And I mean, that's Commissioner Lenny, I think that's a great question, because, well, the TID 7 was created in 2007. What happened in 2008? Yeah. So you can see in the numbers reflected that, I mean, it took a little bit of a longer runway to get that up and going, but given the conservative estimates that were used and fiscally planning that district, I mean, it's still in really good shape and will be in good shape enough so that we're able to ask for some additional expenditures to facilitate development within the district. So I guess the point is that we go into this with a very conservative focus. And almost, you don't ever want to expect the unexpected, but typically we're okay with that because we've got some cushion there.
Doug's correct. If you go through your report, there's still available acres to develop within these TIFs, and they're only taking into account what's there in the ground now that they know. So to point out what a conservative approach we have, if you take TIF 16, which is Amazon, and it's very cash positive going on right now. When we set that up, I mean, when we invest it and we put that TIF together, We did that conservatively because we never, we didn't want to say, oh, you know what, we're going to get 177 million and then fall short. So, that's why we're in the position we're at, without a doubt. As I said, this is key, and this is really reaping what you sow through conservative investment, wise investment, and then leveraging what you have without burdening the taxpayer to do it. And again, we're not extending these, to the full term. We're still getting them out of there early. But again, if we did not do this, there's no way we're going to come up with the money to continue on with the lake. And then we got a half-baked cake down there, and that's never been in the plans. Whether I'm the mayor or anybody else, we have to continue moving forward on these things.
If I could just add,
yes.
As kind of Andrew pointed out, this is not a budget. This is a spending plan. And so this is what is available for the city to do as, assuming the Joint Review Board approves this is what you are permitted to do. Any borrowing, any expenditures on a case-by-case basis, there'll be additional due diligence with those. Those will come back to the city council for final approval. So just as it appears in the plan, this is step one. It still would have to go through the full appropriation process, the full approval process to undertake any debt that might be associated with these projections. So it's just important to kind of recognize that, because your question was like, well, what happens if kind of the sky falls? Right. And what we're saying is that this is what we think is going to happen, but it will be implemented incrementally so that you can make adjustments if need be for the market. The second thing is that also, as Andrew pointed out, under the TIF law, the donation is the last thing to be made. So you kind of have to pay all your bills first within your own district. And then if there's money left over, you can donate it. So again, if one of these districts where we're showing a donation falls a little bit short, making bills of its own, then the level of donation would be less than what we show here. So there's a lot of safeguards in here. This is a spending plan, and kind of gives us the parameters that we'll live within, but then it gets implemented incrementally and can be adjusted based on whatever market conditions are prevailing.
That's good to hear. There's so much that goes into this that is far beyond, the general public's mind. I just don't have the education for it. I can understand it on a broad level, but I think it's just important that, the public knows you're not stretching these TIDs to the thinnest of margins while you're making these donations. And I think that's really important, that if that's one fact, hopefully we can get everyone to understand and, make things a little easier. That's all I guess I was trying to get at.
I think that's a great point. And commissioners, you all asked really good questions. You really did. There's a lot to digest here without a doubt, but you did a great job. Yes, Christine.
I have one more. It's out of curiosity. For TID number 13 for lakefront, has this, all the development, I don't want to call development, but the cleanup and all of this, has this been coordinated, communicated to adjacent municipality, public stakeholders? And if it is, what's their input on that? What's their thoughts?
When you're talking stakeholders, you mean the cleanup will go by DNR and EPA standards?
DNR.
Yeah, they're going to tell us what's needed to clean that up. And Matt, if you want to chime in, you're more versed at this, but we're not going to pick the level at which it gets cleaned up. They're going to tell us what's acceptable.
CDNR is from the cleanup. How about, I'm not sure who's going to be over this for Lake Michigan. City doesn't own Lake Michigan, so who's going to be adjacent?
No, that's the EPA, the DNR. Am I speaking out of turn?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's a number of players involved. And to the extent, certainly DNR, EPA, Vista actually, and many other stakeholders, MMST, have been involved in various aspects of that. But I think that probably from the city's perspective, the planning and the public involvement and the stakeholder involvement for this thing started, a decade ago, maybe not that long ago, and having the public visioning, what do you want this lakefront to be? Right now, it's Oak Creek. The saying was already, oh, you have a lakefront? Because if you were in Oak Creek, you couldn't tell. Our lakefront was fenced off, and you couldn't get down there. So what you see at Lake Vista today really was a result of an extensive stakeholder process with the community to determine what do we want that to be? I mean, do we want that to be what some other communities have done and just, okay, let's sell it off for development? And the answer was pretty resounding no. That's what gives me faith that this council and future councils is going to stick to that vision and really prioritize the public's use and ownership of the lakefront proper. But does that mean there won't be some private development adjacent to it? No, there probably will. But similar to what happened 8-10 years ago, getting the public involved and kind of visioning what that South Bluff, what that Lake Vista area wanted to be and what it turned out to be, that's what we're asking the public to do, and we'll be asking the public to do with that North Bluff now. As Andrew said, we're probably 8 to 10 years behind that. So, envision in the next year or so when we ask you to participate in a workshop, what do you think that North Bluff wants to be? What does public access to lakefront mean? What should happen there? What amenities do we want in that park? Is it a public promenade? Is it
just what went on at Lake Vista?
Exactly. So I mean, this is not a process that's decided upon by a few individuals. It's really a process that's decided upon collectively by all the stakeholders, including the public, including some of those agencies that you talked about.
Yeah, my question, I understand your answer here, but my question is, when you discuss that, what your future plans is, do they have any input? Do they have any concerns? Do they say, okay, go for it, we are not concerned with that? Do they give any input?
Oh, they give a lot of input, yeah.
Okay, good.
They give a lot of input, yeah.
That's my concern.
Sometimes too much input. But
do they have negative input, positive?
No, it's really how our vision integrates into their mission, whether it's the DNR, whether it's the DOT, whether it's the EPA. But generally, they've been very supportive and wonderful partners in trying to help us realize our vision, all while keeping the environment safe and providing those safeguards so that we don't take any unnecessary risks.
So the reason I'm asking, I'm just going to leave it there, is sometimes they know stuff we don't know. So that's what I want to know at the end.
I hope we all shared all our cards on the table. So I think we're certainly we're very appreciative of the partnerships that we forged with them.
Thank you.
So now we will consider a motion on 9A, and the motions will be made separately. They're numbered 1 through 5. We will do each TID district by themselves with a separate vote. Carrie, were you going to say anything?
No, just if there are any concerns about why we're doing these motions separately, they are individual project plan amendments, so they do have to be considered with separate motions. They are available on the screen. Please use the language that is on the screen. If you have any questions regarding this, there were draft resolutions contained in your packets. So if they are passed this evening, they will be prepared for final signature.
Okay. At this time, we'll look for a motion on 9A.
And I move that the Plan Commission adopt resolution number 2021-01, adopting the project plan for tax incremental financing district, TID number 7.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call beginning with Commissioner Sullivan.
Sullivan, aye.
Clark, aye. Bukavich, aye.
Guzekowski. Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Motion then on 9A, number 2, for tax for TID number 8, please.
And I move that the Plan Commission resolution number 2021-02, adopting the project plan for tax incremental financing district, TID number 8.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call beginning with Alderman Lorik. Lorik, aye. Bukavich, aye.
Guzekowski.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Motion on item 9A, item 3 for TID 10, please.
And I move the Plan Commission resolution number 2021-03, adopting the project plan for tax incremental financing district, TID number 10.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call beginning with Bukavich. Bukavich, aye.
Guzekowski.
Aldani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Lorik, aye. And now motion on item 9A, item 4 for TID 13, please.
And I move that the Plan Commission Resolution number 2021-04, adopting the project plan for tax incremental financing district, TID number 13.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Alderman Guzekowski.
Guzekowski, aye. Ladani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Lorick, aye. David, aye. And then motion on 9A, item 5 for TID 16, please.
And I move that the Plan Commission Resolution number 2021-05, adopting the project plan for tax incremental financing district, TID number 16.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Commissioner O'Dani.
Ladani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Lorick, aye. David, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Okay. Item 9A is passed. All items 1 through 5. Commissioners, want to thank you for your attention and your patience because it was a lot, but this is very critical. Andrew, Max, Scott, thank you. Doug, Carrie, appreciate it, all the work. This is a lot. We break it down to be very easy, but this is complicated stuff. But city thanks you as well because you've really helped secure this future.
The commission may not yet know how impactful that vote was, but it was monumental to this community. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. That will get us to, believe it or not, just our second public hearing of the night, which is item 7B, and it's a sign appeal for a proposed sign submitted by Glenn Brusky, Educators Credit Union, and will allow the applicant to install one 7-foot by 5/8 inch by 7-foot 10-inch 3/8 wall sign on the east elevation of the building, and one 7-foot 5/8 times by 7 and 10-inch and 3/8 wall sign on the west elevation of the building and the property, 130 West Town Square Way. Laura, you want to read that properly into the record?
I enjoyed what you just did. It was
I just handed it over shortly and sweetly, but go ahead.
I can't guarantee I'm going to do much better. Published October 13th, 2021, City of Oak Creek, notice of public hearing before the Plan Commission. This meeting will be held both in person and by video conference. Persons wishing to participate in the video conference must register via the website prior to the meeting. The video conference will begin at 5:55 p.m. to allow participants to log in. Persons who wish to view the meeting live without participating may visit the City of Oak Creek YouTube page at the website provided. Persons requiring other reasonable accommodations may contact the city at 414-766-7000. Requests should be made as far in advance as possible, preferably a minimum of 48 hours. This is a public hearing for a sign appeal that will be held October 26, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the Common Council chambers and via Zoom. The appellant is Zach Lindberg. Tax key number is 813-9044-000. Property location is 130 West Town Square Way. This is a request for a variance from section 17.0334 Drexel Town Square Mixed Use Plan Development Signage Guidelines, which states that the maximum sign height cannot exceed 15% of the retail floor height. If granted, the variance would allow the applicant to install 2 wall signs, each 7 feet by 10 inches, 3 1/8, and 7 feet, 5/8 inches wall sign on the east elevation and west elevation. The zoning of this property is DTS MUP DD Drexel Town Square Mixed Use Plan Development District. All interested persons wishing to be heard are invited to be present, dated this 5th day of October 2021. Plan Commission, City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Mayor Dan Bukevich, Chairman. This is a public hearing. All those wishing to speak, please step up to the podium, or for those participating remotely, press *9 on your phone to notify the moderator that you'd like to be unmuted. Please state your name and address for the record and address all questions and comments to the Plan Commission. This hearing is now open. Mayor?
Lori. As Lori stated, this is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak, please approach the podium. Give your name and address. This is the first call. Second call. Anybody wishing to speak, please approach the podium. Name and address. third and final call on item 7B for the sign appeal for Educators Credit Union. If you wish to speak, name and address at the podium, please. We will now close the public hearing on 7B and move to consideration of that sign appeal in item 9B. Lori, would you like to give us a brief synopsis on what's being requested here and
Absolutely.
why it's right, why it's different from what our code states?
So the reason why there's a sign appeal is because of the 17.0334. So the maximum sign height for that wall sign cannot be more than 15% of the retail floor height. The retail floor height of this building is only 11 feet, 8 inches. So that would only allow for a 1 foot by 10 inch sign. So there's quite a difference. However, the atrium height is 18 feet. So it does add a little more height to the building. So here I have the proposed sign locations. There'll be one for the east elevation, one for the west elevation. As you can see, it's closer to the top of the atrium height. On your screen is the dimensions. In trying to anticipate questions that I had last time on the sign appeal, I wanted to provide just context of what's around it in the surrounding retail area. So we do have Water Street Brewery, which is close by just to the north. So the wall sign on that is 2 feet by 33 feet with a retail floor height of 16 feet. An overall building height of 36 feet, 6 inches. The Verizon store just directly to the south of Educators Credit Union, their east and west elevation signs are only 2 feet tall, 9 inches by 12 feet, 8 inches, with a retail floor height of 16 feet and overall building height of 24 feet. So as you can see, the Educators Credit Union is slightly smaller in size of than these two buildings. And that's all I have for you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll go to the commission and we'll start with Commissioner Chandler to my right.
I do have a question for the applicant.
Is anybody with us tonight from Educators or, oh, they're online. Hang on, everybody.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, speak up a little bit, please.
Sorry about that. Yeah, this is Zach with Lemberg Electric, and I am the contractor for this job.
Okay, go ahead, Chauncey.
Do you need the name and address for the record?
Yeah, Zach, last name and the address of Lemberg, please.
Yep, no problem. Zach Wenger, 4085 North 128th Street, Brookfield, Wisconsin, 53005.
Great, thank you, and thank you for the reminder, Commissioner Chandler.
So my question is, can you provide a little information on why the proposed sign is different than the plan or exceeds the plan?
Yeah, and the main reason why, like Lori had stated, is the size requirements based on the Drexel Town Square unit development were too small and would basically be ineffective from both Howell and West Town Square. Obviously, the idea of a sign is to draw customers in, make sure that everyone knows what the building is for and what the building or what the tenant of the building is. Therefore, we found it necessary that we had to increase the size of the sign to properly brand the building from both the east and the west sides of the property.
So just to have a better understanding, so it is this large because of the size of the building?
More so visibility.
Visibility.
I'm sorry?
Please continue.
I was going to say visibility for the most part. Even with the 18-foot atrium height, the overall size of our sign would have only been 2 foot 7 inches high. That's from the top of the logo to the bottom of credit union, making the letters approximately 8 inches high. 8-inch high letters you're not going to be able to see from the roads. Not only that, but if the sign isn't large enough, especially on Howell Ave, and you have people looking over at the building, squinting their eyes aren't on the road, they're looking at the building. It's a recipe for disaster. I haven't seen it in other municipalities, And we believe that the design that we've put forward is a complement to the building, and it works into the overall ratios and dimensions that the architect has laid out for the overall building.
Well, I have a question for Lori. So the sign is so large because of the words as well as the, what do you call it? The
Logo?
Say it again.
Logo?
The logo, thank you. As well as the logo. So, was there any feedback to you on potentially moving the logo so it's not as tall?
Are you asking me or?
Yes.
I mean, we did encourage them to reduce it significantly.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess I would redirect to the applicant. So do you have any other potential layouts, including the verbiage and the logo, so it's not as tall, yet the verbiage can be the same height?
Proportionally, within educators' brand guidelines, we are within their proportions from logo to letters. And as I stated, the idea isn't to go as large as possible. The idea is for maximum visibility from both Howell and West Town Square Road. So that being said, I haven't accounted for that, to be quite honest, because I believe what we're putting forward here isn't overly large in terms of signage, and it's creating maximum visibility for educators' credit union, especially the credit union piece. If you can see how small those letters are in comparison to educators, this is their brand outline, their brand guide that we're following. And if we go any smaller, I'm really concerned that, you're going to lose credit union essentially because the letters will be so small.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Fred, any questions?
We're going backwards, you're not, okay.
Yeah, we're going backwards. I'm going right to left this time. That's okay.
No, I don't see any problem. I think it fits in with the rest of the signage that we have in Drexel Town Square. It varies a little bit. We had some high signs, so forth, but I really don't see a major problem with this sign.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Don?
No questions.
Chris?
No questions.
Greg?
Not really a question. I guess just adding my 2 cents. I did feel the sign was rather large. I hear your explanation as to why you can't really reduce it on the building. Just quick math I did. The standard is 15%, the retail floor height. Currently it's at 67% of the retail floor height. I guess taking the atrium into account, to be within that standard, you'd have to be at 2 feet 8 inches, which is typical to the other buildings that were used, Water Street Brewery and Verizon. Seems a lot more in line with those signs. So I don't know if there's something that they can do to keep the wording the same, but just decrease the size of the logo. But I understand that it's part of the branding as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Matt?
Personally looking at this, the wording itself is roughly, a little less than 3 feet, so 2.5 feet, which is pretty equivalent to what they have on Water Street and Verizon. Those 2 buildings do not have any logos. The increase in size here is simply the logo, as I see it. I know this is DTS, but if you look outside of other locations, there's, the Diamond Jewelry store down the street. They have a huge logo, and we've approved those in the past. Is it large? Yes. Does it fit? I don't think it looks horrible. I don't think it's bad. Could it reduce it a little bit? Any kind of concession would be appreciated. I think we have to look at that in kind of a feel. You look all the way through Drexel Town Square, none of them really have logos. They're all just block lettering. You go all the way through every strip mall we have in there, and that's what we have. So this is introducing a logo. The logo's reduced. You just have a Educators Credit Union. I think it goes away from their branding, so that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Matt. Stan?
And nothing here.
Okay, just my 2 cents, right along the thinking of Commissioner Sullivan. I mean, the lettering's at about 2.5 feet. You reduce that down, that credit union starts to shrink. Proportionately, as the applicant said, you start to shrink the top, it would look out of line with the big letters. It's a little bigger than most, but I think Matt's points are well taken. I mean, it's the logo, the building's primarily glass. There's really nowhere else to go with this thing too. So, I'm okay with it. I mean, you know, it's a spice of life here, I guess, in Drexel Town Square a little bit.
And maybe just a quick thought. When you typically consider variance, you know, obviously everyone has their brand standards, right? And then that's great. But I think when you're looking at a variance, it's what's the minimum variance that is necessary to accomplish what is being requested, both from the city's perspective and from the applicant's perspective. And given that by design, these buildings and all the buildings along in Drexel Town Square have a front-facing elevation right along the street, in this case, Howell Avenue. I think we, and I think Commissioner Sullivan alluded to it, and a few of you alluded to it, Alderman Rourke, you know, we are okay with having, you know, appropriate signage there. I think where we get a little concerned is that, oh, this is our brand standard. And without taking into account your surroundings, your context, and to the extent that the variance could be reduced to the minimum which is actually necessary to make the sign, you know, part of its context, I think we'd all be in favor of that. I just don't know, and I think that the number was thrown out, you know, that 67% of your building needs to be a sign, especially in this context when you're 30 feet away from the road.
I'm well taken, but again, proportionally speaking on the building, I personally don't think it's that bad. You know, so I mean,
sorry.
If you know, proportionally speaking, what about Amazon? Given the size of their sign from where they should be, should and have not gotten a variance to the size it got, given what it is, and proportionally look out of place?
I think it actually did, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, I think that, you know, the danger in saying, well, we did this down the road, or we did this at Amazon, neither of those places is Drexel Town Square. And not to say that, you know, Drexel Town Square is the pinnacle of good design, but certainly there's some intentional thought in there as to how those buildings and, you know, by default, their signage, I want to present to the rest of the community.
True. You know, we've struggled with this throughout Drexel Town Square every time we get a business or a sign in, and how it goes and how it looks. And we do this with every sign that just about comes through here. I'm not saying every single one's a variance, but it's a struggle as you get into the business, the way we measure out signs. So I guess we'll leave it to the commission. It's just my one opinion, so I don't know where they sit, but we'll put it to motion.
Before that, Mayor,
Yeah.
I think the applicant had something to say.
Zach, you got something?
Yeah, I would just add one more point. I think, Mr. Mayor, you did a great job explaining it. As you can see from these elevations, and if you do go look at the building, the majority of the facade is glass. We're kind of working with what we have for signage area. Where Water Street Brewery has an advantage is they have a really long area to work with, whereas we don't. So, you know, like I said, none of this is done out of ill will. It's just for maximum visibility given the proportions of the logo to the letters. So once again, I do appreciate everyone's consideration of this, and always appreciate comments and feedback. So thank you all again.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, the logo on Water Street on the water tower, how big's that one?
You're asking me?
It's not that big. I think it's what, under 2, 3?
It's definitely numbers.
Yeah. And then Chick-fil-A, it's 5 feet. The tallest one for Freighter right now is only, I think, 3. And Freighter, it's a 4-story building. Myers is 17.
Okay, leave it to the commission. Looking for a motion on B, 9B.
Ladani moves that the Plan Commission approves sign variances allowing the installation of one 7-foot 10 3/8 by 7-foot 5/8 inch wall sign on the east elevation and one 7-foot 10 3/8 and by 7-foot 5/8 inch wall sign on the west elevation of the building located at 130 West Town Square Way.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call beginning with Commissioner Seifert.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, no.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Clark, no. Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Ladani, aye.
You got it. Okay. Moving on, that will be the end of the public hearings. That'll get us to old business, and that is item 8A, and it's a master landscape plan review submitted by Dave Decker Properties for the multi-resident on the properties at 8100, 8146 South 27th, and 8100 South Orchard Way. Carrie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a little bit of an update here. We have been in discussions with the applicant and their consultants, and breaking news, they've hired a landscape architect to help them out with their master landscape plan. We did have a meeting with them this morning. They are on the right track, although they do need a little bit more time to get that master landscape plan fine-tuned so that they can bring it before you. They're hoping to bring it before you at the next meeting. However, I would caution against putting a date and time certain because, again, the recommendation for this one, to give them a little bit more time, is to hold. Same with the next item on the agenda. So the recommendation at this point is to hold until they have an opportunity to get that landscape plan in order.
Okay, so that will hold true for item 8A as well as B, but they will be separate motions.
Correct.
Somebody like the motion on 8A?
Clerk moves that the Plan Commission hold action on the proposed master landscape plan submitted by David Decker, Decker Properties, for the properties at 8100 and 8146 South 27th Street and 8100 South Orchard Way.
Guzekowski, seconds.
Roll call beginning with Commissioner Chandler.
Chandler, aye.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Clark, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Ladani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
And again, the same will hold true with the landscape plans for B as well, correct?
It's the full plan review for the Oaks at 8100. Those are being held as well, pending the master landscape plan review.
So somebody'd like to move on 8B to hold?
Clerk moves to hold action on site building and related plans submitted by David Decker, Decker Properties, for the properties at 8100 and 8146 South 27th Street and 8100 South Orchard Way.
Guzekowski, second.
Roll call beginning with Commissioner Hannah.
And I.
Sullivan, aye.
Clark, aye. Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Ladani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay, that, since we got through the TID amendments and the sign appeal on A and B, that will get us to 9C, and that is Plan Commission Consultant. It's just a discussion on a potential residential development, and this is conceptual, submitted by CR Devco LLC for the properties at 1933 and 2231 West Putes, 8843 South 13th Street, and 8950 South 20th. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will give a brief introduction to CR Devco, and then they will begin their presentation. This is just a conceptual discussion. No action will be taken by the Plan Commission. The current zoning is quite a few districts because of the multiple properties that are involved in this. However, you will see that it is broken up into a couple of zones. The zoning includes RS2, which is single-family residential, RD1, which is two-family residential, B4, which is highway business along 27th Street. There is floodway that affects these properties. The 27th Street portion is in the NO neighborhood overlay district. There are flood areas throughout the property, and there are property portions that are in the C1 Shoreline Wetland Conservancy District. So this is a proposed phase development in two zones, again, conceptual. Zone 1 would include a CSM to reconfigure these properties. It's about 4 properties right now, 2 within the RD district completely as far as the base district is concerned. Those would be the main portions that will be discussed tonight, and then a portion of the larger, kind of oddly shaped parcel that goes along 27th Street and Putes. It does include a future public street that is partially in. I will mention that there are utilities that are to the RD1 site currently. Proposal is for about 136 units and 24 residential buildings. As the developers will be presenting tonight, these are single-story, kind of side-by-side, single-family type residential multifamily buildings that we're going to be discussing. Again, this is conceptual in nature. There are no decisions that are going to be made. Phase 2 or Zone 2 for the remainder of the property will be held at this time for future single-family, although that is also in discussion. Whether or not this moves forward, Zone 2 would be reserved for further down the road. Concept plan on the screen right now is probably going to be going into much more detail by the developers, but just want to highlight that we are mostly going to be discussing Zone 1, and that will be on the concept plan kind of off of Putes Road and then going along the properties that are mostly along the freeway. And this is just kind of blowing up the area that we're going to be mostly talking about. These are 4, 6, and 8 unit buildings that are being proposed, and some concept renderings showing what those units could potentially look like should the project move forward. And rather than taking up too much time, I will turn it over to the developers for their presentation.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much. My name is Ryan Swingruber, and I live at 228 Raymond Ave in Barrington, Illinois. Sitting next to me is my partner, Josh Woolrick, and together we represent CR Devco. So we're here to talk tonight about the 91-acre site at the southeast corner of West Putes and 27th Street. As Carrie was alluding to, our mission, CR Devco's mission, is to develop single-story, low-density, multifamily housing that lives and feels like a single-family home. And so we'll get more into the specifics on that. So how did we come to identify the site? Oak Creek was a community early on that we identified as a prospective market for our product type. We reached out to community development early on and discussed several sites, this being one of them. The history and feasibility of the site has never been developed. We attribute that to the presence of significant wetlands, an environmental corridor in the site, which is some of the challenges, as well as the site fronts I-94 on the Zone 2, which we'll discuss, with significant topography. So most specifically on our product type, which is important to understand, is how do we accomplish, creating an apartment that lives and feels like a single family home? Well, the first is through the craftsman style architecture. It's low density and single story. Your traditional apartments are 2 to 3 stories in the height. Second, 2-car direct access garage are provided throughout the community. Typical apartment communities, you'll find significant surface parking because only single car direct access garages are provided, and not always for every unit. What this allows us to do now is we can create meaningful private and public open spaces, what we like to call garden courtyards, and we'll specifically discuss that when we review the site plan. Those will replace many of the asphalt parking lots that you typically find in a traditional garden style community. The fourth item is the units are larger than your traditional apartments. A traditional apartment tends to look to be more efficient and reduce square footage to thereby reduce the rent. These larger units will provide traditional laundry rooms, additional storage options, and the 2-car direct access garage, as we've discussed. Also, please keep in mind that these buildings are energy efficient. They've been designed per National Green Building Standards, bronze level certification. And then most importantly, which will speak to our demographic that we're targeting, is they are universally designed, which is ADA compliant. So what does that mean? Stepless entrances, single floor living, and then all doorways and passageways are 32 inches or greater, allowing for proper approaches. So why have we designed it in a manner to be single story, universally designed, prioritize green space? Our target demographic is baby boomers, active seniors, and downsizers. So we're looking for people that are looking to downsize, that want to remain in their community, but still live in something that feels like a single family home, but with the efficiencies of multifamily, snow removal, landscaping, insurance, utilities, etc. Through this product and this exploration, we also believe that this will be highly desired by millennials as well, planning for family formation, looking for a community that they eventually want to raise their kids in and buy their house. Due to some of the market, concerns in terms of, entrance level housing and down payments, we believe this will be very attractive for those saving for eventually making Oak Creek their future home. And so that is a very brief introduction to the product type. Josh and I have 35 years in real estate finance and development experience, and we're more than happy at a future date to provide references, resumes, and also our previous projects that we've developed throughout the country. So with that said, I'll turn it over to my partner, and he's going to present on our site plan.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Josh Walreich. I live at 313 Surrey Lane in Lake Forest, Illinois. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of the site plan here. So up on the screen now, you'll see the zones of this development as Kerry was talking about. We're really here tonight to talk about Zone 1. Zone 1 includes these two parcels, as well as a portion of Parcel 1, which is this much, much larger parcel. Zone 2, we are not developing at this point, and if it is developed in the future, we would imagine that it's developed under its current zoning, which is single-family residential for this portion here. And this is a commercial portion that fronts on both Putes and 27th. So for our product and our site plan, we're proposing 136 units, which will consist of 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom units. The majority will be 1 and 2 with a couple of 3 bedroom units in there as well. These are going to be market rate units. And these units will rent, the small units, the 1 bedrooms will rent from approximately $1,400 a month to the 3 bedrooms, which will rent for approximately $2,600 a month. The average size of these units is much larger than a typical multifamily development. Our average size here is 1,361 square feet, which obviously lends itself to our designation of being single family much more than a typical multifamily. Another important consideration, as you saw in the renderings, we will have 2-car attached garages for 90% of these units. The only units that won't are our smallest 1-bedroom unit, and those units will have a single attached garage. But each unit will also have a 22-foot parking apron here. So our parking, our dedicated parking, so the parking that is dedicated to the residents will actually be, I think it's 3.7 parking spaces per unit on average. And then throughout the community, we will also have guest parking. If guests don't park on the apron in front of the garage when they come and visit, there will also be designated parking areas throughout the development for public parking as well. A couple important things to note here. The density is really low here. So this parcel here, 3 and 4 are 2 parcels. Including a portion of Parcel 1. This is about 50 acres that we'll be taking on in the very first part of this development, which again, I should say really the only development that we're proposing at this point is 50 acres. Of that 50 acres, 30 acres is to remain open space. Everything you see around here is wetlands, existing tree vegetation that we will keep in place, and then along 94, we'll be creating our on-site detention for stormwater, as well as a berm that will hopefully mitigate some of the sound that would be coming from I-94. So what that comes out to is on these 50 acres, we are 2.7 units an acre. That's very, 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 very low for a multifamily development. As I mentioned, a lot of this open space creates sizable setbacks from neighbors. So anyone who lives over on Gray's Lane, all this development here is remaining undeveloped. You have some neighbors at the end that may be able to see the property, but we intend to put plantings here to protect views as much as possible and maximizing setbacks. And again, same thing on the 20th. As much as possible, we're creating space between the adjacent users, the adjacent residential units, so that they don't, they're not bothered by the development. So in addition to the units themselves, we'll have some community amenities. I had mentioned the conservation and open space, but something else, and this is kind of hard to see at a plan of this scale, but when you zoom in, the distance between these units is close to 80 feet. So we created these, what we call garden courtyards, and these are the front doors to all of these units. They're rear loaded. This is the image that I just showed you with the parking garages and the aprons to the parking garages. The front doors, as much as possible, open up onto either the protected areas that we aren't going to be developing or onto these two very large garden courtyards. And again, when you go back to the rendering and you look at how that how that feels to the residential users of our development, you can see this is an example of the open space. We've got, each unit will have a covered private porch on the front and a more public but private to their unit patio on the side. So each unit really has two dedicated outdoor spaces, and your unit opens up onto these either garden courtyards or onto the preserved open space around the community. We intend to have a dog park down here and a playground for residents that have children. We expect that that'll be the minority, but obviously with the empty nesters being our primary demographic, we expect that there'll be grandkids on the property occasionally, so we wanted to make sure we created some amenity for them. And then finally, we will also have a walking path that traverses the entire development here. You can see it'll go on the outside, and it'll provide opportunity for exercise and also connectivity between the units and all the neighbors. So with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it. Before we go to commission, there's a couple comments people submitted. We're not a public hearing, but it is conceptual. We want to respect all that. So first one, and you guys can answer, these are actually in question form. It's from Catherine Kane, 8930 South 21st Street. She did not wish to speak, but she did want the comment read publicly. First question. Is Oak Creek receiving federal funds to build high-density housing? Oak Creek is not building these, so this is self-funded. If you guys want to answer, if you're taking federal funds of any sort.
We are not.
Okay. Number two, it just says subsidized housing, which obviously no.
Yeah, these are, it's all intended to be market rate. So again, at $1,400 to $2,600 a unit, these are not subsidized houses.
Okay, and then number three, apartment units ratio to single family homes in Oak Creek, and I will defer that one to Carrie or Doug. I know we set a standard as to what we do, but do you have those statistics off the top of your head by chance? Anybody?
I do. And it's not, it's general in nature, but typically 60% to 40%. Now that's changed obviously over the years as the economics of single family development have becoming much more difficult and challenging. And as some of the newer multifamily and residential concepts have kind of come into play, but it's generally been the 60-40 range. So it's probably sliding a little bit. So I'd probably say 55-45 would be a safe number.
I did know 60-40 was always the general plan, but I don't know where we've been lately. And you're correct. Single family housing is rather expensive to develop. So,
and maybe the one thing, I mean, as the definitions of single family and multifamily really do change. I mean, it was in years past, it was you either had a single family lot, right, and a single family house, which a lot of us, myself included, have, or you had the multifamily, which really was, the 3-4 story garden style apartments. And there was really never anything in between. So as these new types of housing styles do kind of make their way into the fabric of the community, excuse me, it really is a way of, the structures, by their definition, there's more than one family, right? There's 4s and 6s, but in the way it's laid out, it's very similar to a zero lot line single family residential community, low rise, things of that nature. So, comments aside, and I'm sure we'll get some really good comments with respect to this plan, but I think it's part of the city's comprehensive plan to really allow for diversity in housing types and some of these types that have, quite frankly, been missing from the community. And this is one of those. And I'd love to hear some of the comments and how we can make this fit into the fabric of the existing community better. But I think that it's important that as a community as a whole, we look at, some of the things that kind of fill that missing middle in the gap.
Great. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. Next is Ellen Licht, 1911 West Putes Road. Did not wish to speak, but would like to have the comments read publicly. Again, kind of in question form, who is assuring the wetlands will not be negatively affected? Is that the DNR or MMSD? Whether our staff handles that or you guys. Anybody want to take that one? I mean, obviously, what the wetlands are always taken into account.
Yes,
any development.
Absolutely. And so those agencies that you referenced, first and foremost, we had to do a wetland delineation early on to determine feasibility. And so there's parameters when that has to be updated, and then that has to be filed. And then those agencies will then review. And then there's also a list of setbacks and standards with the city. So not only will it be designed in accordance with those standards with the city, but also with state and federal. And so our local engineer Sigma group has run that analysis, and early on, we're taking into account those setbacks.
Okay. And then secondly, what is the density and how will this increase our taxes? The assumption that it'll increase our taxes is yet to be seen. Usually these apartments are self-sufficient for garbage pickup and snow removal and things like that, short of public streets. So, I'll let you guys take it from there on that.
Well, I guess
Well, maybe with the perspective, I think, Mayor, you're trying to address it with the taxes. The taxes are a value of the community versus the budget of the community. And given what I expect the value of this community to be versus the demands it would place on the city, whether it be schools or snow plowing or garbage collection, which would all be private. Typically, and this is probably an older study, which probably needs a little bit of updating, but we have found that actual, single-family homes are the biggest demand drivers in terms of services, and that some of these other types of residential living, again, given the fact that they do have some of their services provided privately, you don't have as much of an impact and still provide that value to the tax base.
Thank you, Doug.
And the only thing I'd follow up on is it's early on, obviously, in the discussion, but it would be our preference that the majority of the roads in the community would be private. And if that is the case, we would maintain them and take care of them. And then at the same time, snow removal, trash removal, maintenance of said roads will be covered through the rent and through capital reserves. So the responsibility of the developer.
And then Ellen had a density question. I know you mentioned it, and if you could just go over that one more time. And
yeah, absolutely. So the zone that we are referring to for the development, we are at 2.72 units per acre, which is more consistent with single family detached as opposed to multi-family in terms of density. And I think that was consciously done because for some of the reasons that I have outlined, the goal is really to make these feel like a single family home and live differently. And the goal for that is to attract a specific type of demographic, people downsizing from their homes, but still wanting to live in something that feels like that without traversing stairs, taking an elevator, sharing a common hallway, having open space as opposed to asphalt parking lots throughout the community. So that was intentional.
I thank you. Anything to add to that, Doug, or adequate? Okay. Next, we have Debbie Fisher, 1861 West Putes Road. Again, does not wish to speak, but would like to have the following comments publicly read. Are these garden apartments government subsidized? And how will the development affect our current tax base? So, I mean, kind of went a little bit through that, but again, we're not government subsidized, and we kind of covered the tax base. And again, I think Doug did a really nice description of that. So, and then lastly, I'd like to invite Barbara Linder, 2411 West Putes. You wish to speak? You got to come to the podium, ma'am. You got to come up to the podium. Sorry.
Well, you already informed me.
Oh, if you want to pull that down so you're on the record.
I'm Barbara Linder, 2411 West Putes Road, but you're not addressing our property. You're only addressing further down. You're not addressing ours tonight.
Well, you're up at the podium. Please ask a question while we have them there.
I can ask them what they're going to build there?
Well,
because he said they're not addressing that. They're not going to do anything.
You're talking about directly north of Gray's Lane, and is that zone 2?
We're the first ones off 27th
Oh, yeah,
Street.
Correct. I guess
You know, so.
They do own the 4 parcels, and there's 4 zones, right?
Right.
And they'd rezone it, but right now there's nothing really planned from 27th Street south to 18th.
See, my question was, what are you planning to build next to our property? Because our property would be affected on 2 sides, the whole length of the property and the whole back. And we went through this years ago with a different developer, and it was not good. So we went and that's what we were interested in, but you're not discussing that now because you're not doing it.
No, they don't have plans to develop it at this time, but they did say the zoning right now would remain, and currently it is single family attached. So
right,
as of right now, it would stay zoned what it is right now and has been, single family attached.
All right, that's all I was interested in.
And Mayor, can I just say one thing? The current zoning, I believe, is RS2, and it's single family detached. So it's not attached. I just want to clarify that. So it would be in line with the communities to the north and south, to the homes to the north and to the communities to the south. As my partner alluded to, we do not develop single family homes. We have no intention of developing that, and we don't want to change the zoning. At this time, we're going to leave the zoning in place, and if someone were to come along, another developer that wanted to develop single family homes, that would be, we wouldn't explore it, but that would be available to the market to determine. So we're not asking for any change there. Right now, we're proposing that that'll stay as is with its current zoning.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to the commission, is there anybody else who would like to come up? Got to come to the podium, guys, one at a time. Name and address, please, if you have questions for the applicant.
Thank you. Adam King, 2315 West Vista, Bella Drive, Oak Creek. The apartments you're planning on building, they're going to stay permanent apartments? They're not going to go to for sale at any point?
That's correct.
And what kind of time frame are you looking at for breaking ground if everything goes correctly?
Hopefully it would be mid-summer of next year, but there's a lot of things in play for that. And
obviously,
and I think this is an important step, right? We're appreciative to be here for the consultation. I think we want to work collaboratively, and depending on how the next steps go, that would be a best case.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
What's going on, Dan?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. It's kind of a long day though, ain't it, everybody?
Yeah, you can run, but you can't hide,
you guys picked a long meeting to wait for. I'll tell you.
Name's Patrick. Name's Patrick, 10/2021 West Grays Lane. And since my property is directly involved in this, I have a few questions. First off, the tree line. What's going to happen to all the maple trees, which is the state tree in here?
So we've worked with staff to date, and there are, I believe, current zoning, there's a 60 and 80 foot setback that's required for properties just like yours. And so while it's tough to see in that site plan, we've worked with the engineer because we have to honor those. And the goal would be to preserve as much natural vegetation as possible.
Okay, and how much, well, if somebody can blow that up, how much of it are you gonna get there? Because you've got a line, you've got a line right there.
Where we?
It's not gonna show up. Okay. You got a line that won't show there either. Okay. Screw that.
Patrick, which house is yours? Is this one?
Which one?
Where the hand
above
is?
15 or below? Or on 15?
On 15.
On 15, right here.
On 15.
Okay.
So with that, how far are you gonna come in? How far, what are you gonna be doing there? What's the setbacks gonna be? You gonna go right from the property line and go east? Or are you gonna come west on there?
So on this image, the property line is designated as this red dash line. So we would honor the setbacks that are required here to make this as I think, and Carrie, maybe you know this off the top of your head. I can't remember exactly what the setbacks are here, but we would honor the setbacks required here. And again, we would intend to maintain any vegetation here that exists as much as we can. And if there isn't significant vegetation here, we would be planting here to try to create that buffer.
So the minimum setback for multifamily residential buildings to a single-family residential district line is 50 feet.
Okay, then you could possibly keep the trees that are there right now. Also, you have down 2.7, 2 3/4 houses per acre. That's kind of tight as far as I'm concerned. And then you also have in here, okay, you have plans for, well, you have Gray's Road, wherever that is, I do not know. It's Gray's Lane and 20th Street that you're going to connect sidewalks to the adjacent properties. Okay, how much are you going to go on there?
Well, our current site plan, as you can see here, does not connect to either Gray's or to 20th. We have a sidewalk internal to our property, and again, not connecting to any sidewalks on Gray's or 20th. If those, I can't tell from the image whether or not there are sidewalks on those.
There are no sidewalks there.
Okay, so we are not intending on putting any sidewalks or connectivity to the roads of Gray's and 20th.
Good, because if you go with sidewalks, you're going to be buying my house. I have an 82-foot lot line.
Okay.
So if you come anything south on Gray's Lane, you're buying my house. And plus, the people that moved out there, we moved on to like Gray's because we like the quiet. Even though on Saturdays and Sundays, we get 17 cars per hour down the road on a dead-end street. And also on 20th, the dead-end street, we like that for the serenity that's around there. You have that you would be connecting 20th. Where would you be connecting 20th?
We are not connecting.
You're not connecting 20th. So the way Gray's Lane and 20th Street are going to stay that way.
That's correct. It might be, and I apologize, a typo on what you're referencing, but if the site plan that we've worked to, you can see there's no connectivity.
You know, in all transparency, this is conceptual, but you need 2 entrances in there for emergency vehicles for fire and police. So realistically speaking, one of the 2 would connect to this. Because Assistant Chief Havey, would you like to comment on that? And again, this is a public safety issue. So Chief Havey, if you'd like to kind of explain. And again, conceptually, it's not shown, but in all transparency, I'm not going to let you sit here and say it's never going to happen.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question on that? I think we're fine with the idea that there would be emergency connections there. The question is whether or not it has to be a permanent.
And you know what? It's not my call. That's why I got guys like Chief Havey here.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Avey, Assistant Chief Fire. So the emergency access, we require a secondary route into this plan. So we haven't seen really the proposal yet as to how that would look. So at this point, there's still time to draft or look at where their options are. So it's just, this is the basic, if they're consulting.
Very conceptual.
Yeah, so at this point, but we will require a secondary access to the site.
All right, thank you, Chief. Assistant Chief.
Okay, so if you're requiring a secondary access to the site, if you can take your cursor and move it down along, no, just keep it up big, please, if you can. Okay, if you can bring your screen up so we get to the southern edge of your property that you're doing.
Like this?
Yeah. Okay, if you could bring your road in and connect to your two buildings that's right there on the bottom. You see what I'm talking about?
Here?
No, down further. Down further.
Down here.
Yes. If you could bring it in through there, it'd be greatly appreciated. It would keep the drunks out of my yard and on my off my house, which my house has been hit several times.
Again, very conceptual, and that's something we can work through, and they would work through with fire on that as well.
And these are all going to be apartments.
Yes, sir. And one question I just had, when you referenced the density being tight, was that too much or too little?
Well, I'll put it this way. In the spirit of a very good person that everybody in Oak Creek knows, Dick Bolander, take it to Franklin.
Okay. Anybody else before I go? Come on up, ma'am.
There. Rhonda Koenig, 2125 West Putes. If you want to put that on. So that road there is going to be the main road going in, the primary road?
Correct.
So what does that do for me? What is that building you got on the road though?
Over here?
Yeah, what is that?
It's a leasing office.
Isn't that right by the wetlands though?
This is honoring the setbacks of the wetlands.
See, my problem is we moved from Milwaukee here 6 years ago with our autistic grandson. He has no regard for cars. No matter how many times you tell him, he has no regard. He will run into the road. It's hard enough for us to keep him off of NASCAR Road, Putes, because, that ditch and everything. We have to be on him like that. And we're older now, It's hard to get him. So I'm just concerned about a road right next to my house. Now I have two roads I have to watch with him. And he's also nonverbal. So, I mean, I've seen the wetland guys come in with the truck and I was cutting grass and my grandson was there. He ran right up to that moving truck. He climbed in the guy's truck just about. I can't, what is going to be done about that? Is there going to be any way to shelter that road or am I going to have to pay for that so he don't run down there? Or you're going to be buying my house too.
But again, correct me if I'm wrong, that isn't officially mapped straight, correct?
It's not marked though.
Ma'am?
It is shown on the official map, so that street in some way, shape, or form, and I think one of the other residents talked about the past development proposal when the water tower went in, and then that was the route of that public street. Now, having said that, I think that there are ways that we can work with these gentlemen or whoever would develop that property now in the future to minimize that through landscaping or if there's fencing involved. Certainly we want to be cognizant of the challenges that you face as homeowners, but at some point that will likely be a public street.
Right. So
want to make sure that it's as safe as possible for you, but it's probably going to be there.
Yeah, well, we moved there from the city, not to move to another city. You know what I'm saying?
I understand, but that's, I mean, that's.
We needed our grandson to have room to run. That's the only reason we left Milwaukee.
But that has been on the maps for, and again, for more than 6 years, so.
Well, then, like the gentleman said, you developers might be buying my house too.
So what?
Because that is right there.
Sir, we'll need your name and address.
Oh, he's my husband. This is Jeff Koenig.
Same address.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the green area between?
Need your comments on my, sir.
What is the green area between the house and the road or the property?
You're saying to plan west of
Right
your
there,
house.
yes.
So that rectangle.
No, the other, where you were before.
You're saying here?
Yes.
So it's conceptual right now, but as Mr. Seymour was saying, we would work with the city to have a vegetation buffer and then evaluate a fence as well, if that was a concern of yours. But it's conceptual, so it's hard to, convey that to you. But right now we are showing new plantings of trees and bushes and vegetation to create a buffer.
Yeah, I don't think that's big enough. There's no way. You guys will be way in the wetland.
Sir, it's just conceptual at this point in time. They're just kind of showing you where things are lying.
Yeah, we're just saying our views, to take in,
I
account.
understand. I understand.
Thank you.
So. Yes, sir.
Hi, Joe Netzler, 9031 South 20th Street. I lived here 40-some years. And I started out on a dead-end road, and all of a sudden, we have apartments down to the south of us. Now we're going to have apartments to the north of us. I understand your TIDs and your TIFs and all the development we're doing, but I have some problems with this development. Like you said, you're going to have 2 entrances. Nobody wants it on Gray's Lane, and nobody wants it on 20th Street. I speak for all my neighbors. Why don't you go out back on their property on Putes Road for your second exit?
Can't get through the wetlands.
No, I'm talking about this up here. That's not part of their wetlands.
But again, in the master plan of the city and for public safety, you always look to connect neighborhoods, and planning can speak more to that. And I know that's not the answer you want to hear. And again, it's conceptual. And maybe that'll be an option down the stretch. Right now, this is just conceptual.
Years ago, when this was supposed to be developed, that was the major thing they talked about, is they would not make 20th Street a main thoroughfare. So that's my objection, I guess. If they can put a road in on their own property to make 2 entrances and exits, that's great. But they shouldn't make all the rest of us suffer because they want to make some money.
Understood. Okay, yes, sir.
Elwood Fawcett, 9040 South 20th Street. I've just got a couple questions. And first of all, I want to say I'm not totally opposed to the property being developed. And I fully understand the need to consolidate the development into a smaller area because of the parameters of the wetland and everything else. But I am opposed to any zoning change that would take place. I can point to a development just to the south of this area, Virginia Place. It's zoned very similar. It's zoned 2-family, and it was developed with a PUD with a high density on the west half of the development and a very low density on the east half, but all within the existing zoning. And I wouldn't be opposed to that. At this point, I would have to be opposed to this. The other question is on the access. You have said there has to be a secondary access. The fire department has said there has to be a secondary access, except my understanding is the official map doesn't provide for a secondary access. It provides for internal streets with no access to 20th Street and to Hilltop or Gray's Lane. Is a secondary access only because it's multifamily?
No, and maybe I can clarify.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Craig. How are you? Good to see you. The official map actually does show a potential future right-of-way acquisition to connect Gray's Lane and 20th Street, if I'm not mistaken. It's just that, again, we may not have the right-of-way for that in certain cases, but it does show a connection. I'm pretty certain about that. Yeah.
The background that you show on these drawings, shows the street pattern. Is that from the official map?
I'm not sure what they're showing on that drawing, but I can share with you what our official map is.
Okay.
And then to answer your second part of the question, no, I mean, honestly, from my perspective, the need for a second point of access is as great for the folks along Gray's Lane as it is for the folks who would be in this other neighborhood. I think that we've seen, what unfortunately can happen along Gray's Lane when certain events take place unregulated along 27th Street. And, that quite frankly scares me a little bit in terms of, if you need to get public services back there doing something like that. And that's why at a minimum, we would look for some emergency access, not only for this development, but for the folks along that end of Grays.
I just find it odd that the preliminary development plan for this area that was developed at the time the water main went in and the sanitary sewer went in was for 1 and 2 family, basically 2 family condo, I believe, along the eastern part, and that provided for no secondary access. And again, that was preliminary, but it was never brought up then. And
we'll look at that, but I think it probably, the official map at least does.
Yeah, the proposal did not. It was developed by Nordfein.
Yep.
And at that point, it did not. So there's a change. Thank you.
Okay. One more? Okay. Sam?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Plan Commission. My name is Sam Lenda, 1701 West Putes Road, up in the corner right where number 3 is over there. I kind of mirror Craig's thing that I don't stand in the way of development. I believe development is good for the city. We fought this battle many years ago. Like you said, Nordfein and Yogi Shaw. They wanted to put the, 600 some units there, the high density residential. And I'll remind the Plan Commission, we served a protest petition on the council where every affected property owner signed it and said, we are not in favor of the rezoning. If you develop with the rezoning that's there, nobody had a problem with that, but we didn't want it rezoned. And that's what we're looking for. If you can do it under R1, what it is right now, that's not a problem. We didn't care about it. Problem is the high density residential, I believe, scares people. The other fact that it's apartments. If it'd be condos, I don't think anybody would be here right now. They wouldn't care. I think they'd be saying, hey, you got a vested interest in the property that you own. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take it to commission. How about it, Christine? You want to start us off? Got questions?
No, I have no question. I just heard a lot of comments. So.
Okay. Something pops up, let me know. Matt?
I don't have any questions. Most of my comments actually were brought up by residents, which we do appreciate all of you taking your time to come out. All the commissioners do and staff and also the future or potential developers. I guess as far as engineering wise, some of our concerns would be the stormwater for probably the first 3 buildings come off of Pewitz and how we see there could be potential issues there getting it back to your ponds along the I-94 corridor. You've been pretty observant on the wetlands and the floodplain area, it seems to be. Obviously, we'd have to work closer if this came to more detailed plans or if it moves forward. Let me see here. Comprehensive plan. Would there be an amendment? I think there would have to be an amendment on that. So that's another concern that we brought up. Same with the rezoning aspect of it. So most of them were answered and taken care of, but appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, man. Greg?
I think all my questions were answered. Just a quick comment. While this isn't in my district, the second district is just north of Pewitz, as well as the neighborhood I live in. So this also would affect my neighborhood. I appreciate you guys coming forward this early in the game. I mean, not every development comes this early to discuss with neighbors and the commission. So I appreciate that, being open to feedback. The overall development, I mean, I do like the look of it. I mean, I like the single story versus another huge complex being proposed. So, I mean, I look forward to being able to provide more input. So thank you.
Yes. I think that I appreciate everybody coming out. I had requested that we open up the mailing parameters to everybody gets an invite because everyone's information is very important. And I do like the look of what they've got going here. And when they asked my thoughts on it, right now I support it, but we have a ways to go. And I think similar to what Sam said earlier, you know, if these were condos and not a rental type of situation, people would have a vested interest. So I think that's where one of the big hang-ups are. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Don? No questions. I kind of like the way it looks so far. Okay, Fred?
Yeah, it's a road, the entrance road coming into your development. Is that going to be a private road, or is the city going to be responsible for that road?
Well, as I would say that our preference would be that it would be a private road, but that would have to be determined after further workings with engineering and preferences of the city. So our preference would be it's private.
What about the roads then in your development too? Will they also be private?
That would be our preference, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And the only other question that was brought up by Matt is the water problem on Peach, the flood fringe or the flood flow. If you get a bad rain, your entrance has to be high enough to handle it because it can go over Peach and you can actually have a problem getting through. You get a 7-inch rain and Peach is shut down for a day. You can't get through unless you got a boat. You also have some problems with some of the small creeks that you have down in your development too that you need to take a look at, because you could have a problem with some of your developments. And then number 3, are there going to be basements at all with any of these? No basements.
No basements.
Okay. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Fred. Chauncey?
Just a quick question in regards to where these apartments will reside. Since it's pretty much surrounded by water, and as the commissioner just stated, there sometimes can be water issues on Pews. Will these homes, or I should say residents, will they be elevated? Will they be higher than the homes that surround them?
So I think first and foremost, thanks for the comments on the roadway coming off Pews. So that is something I think we'll further evaluate. But I can tell you that parcels 3 and 4 up on the screen, the topography is very significant running west to east. So strategically, the detention ponds that you see are at the lowest point and thereby would be preventative from any issues on the dwelling units. So all the water would be moved down the hill, for lack of a better term. I do appreciate the comments on the 2 buildings that come into the property. We'll take a look at that with our engineers to make sure that that's properly designed. But we feel confident that based upon the topography and where we have the detention, that will not be an issue for the majority of the community.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So if this property is raised some so that the water flows down, how will that, or how can you make sure that the other surrounding properties are taken care of?
So the storm system would be designed as such that it would move all the water to the detention ponds. So it'd be curb and gutter on the streets, and like I was saying, well, it's hard to see on the screen, but if everything west of along Grays, that topography is a lot higher than everything near I-94. So naturally, the system would be designed to move everything to the ponds that we have illustrated in the conceptual plan. But it would be designed per code with the storm system with curb and gutter to move everything down and with underground pipes.
Thank you.
As Chauncey, I can speak to that a little bit more. Under Chapter 13, they're required to capture all water within their property and manage that. They're also required to treat any water that gets onto their site from off-site or have it pass through. So there are very strict regulations that we have within our stormwater maintenance code. That's actually stricter than most agencies around here. So be assured if it does move forward, they'll be working with our stormwater engineers to make sure that's all managed properly.
Thank you.
Guess I kind of got the last. I do just want to make a couple comments. I want to thank Chris for expanding the mailing area. I mean, this is an impactful project going forward, and we do got a ways to go. It is conceptual. I did meet with the applicant early on, showed us what was going on there. They, like any property owner, do have a right to ask for a rezone of their property and look to develop it. I know, that's always tough on a neighborhood, so we want to be sensitive to that. But we do have a ways to go to see how this all fits and works. And I want to thank you guys for coming forward. They did say they were, going to have neighborhood meetings if they move ahead with it. So, very rarely do we just get something like this and bang, that's it, and it goes through. Our staff works pretty diligently with them behind the scenes. It may look like it flows real quick and easy here, but there's a lot of work that goes on through engineering and stormwater and traffic and the whole thing. And just like with fire, to address those connectivity things and to make sure they can get in there, as Commissioner Siebert brought up, if there's flooding problems on Putes, we can very, very well have a 100 and some odd unit thing stranded there like Gilligan's Island and nobody can get to it. So we got a ways to go. But again, and you know what, I want to thank all of you guys and ladies for coming out, because it was a pretty long night and you guys, happened to pick the end of the agenda and we went through some pretty heavy stuff there. But again, we take each one as they come. As you said, other people have tried to develop this in the past, and obviously it didn't work. So someone else is going to see if they got a better idea, and we'll see where we wind up. So no action is required on this. So with that, unless there's any other comments from the commissioners, we'll look to adjourn. And wow, geez, we don't have Carrillo here. Who's going to do this?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, wait, hang on. You got one more thing to say. Name and address, please.
Adam King, 2315 West Vista Bella Drive. With all of us here, maybe next time, could we schedule this to be first in the line of things, just because we all have stuff to do tomorrow? And
part of the driver of this is we had a very expensive consultant sitting here on the clock, so he went first.
2 different dates.
But we do try to take that into effect, and if we do have people here, that's why when I do the public hearings, I take the item right away just so we can move people out. But do apologize, but again, no way of knowing who's going to show and who's not going to.
It's concerning for all of us as residents of the area, so just waiting 2.5 hours.
Oh, we understand. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just one quick announcement before we adjourn. Congratulations to Matt Sullivan, who will be the next city engineer as of January 8th. So thank you. That's the one common council action that was taken that affects us.
Yes, I did. I forgot to mention that. Congratulations, Matt. And whether Matt sticks out his nights with us here, going on to 9 o'clock, remains to be seen. So we may get a new face come 2022. But he'll still be an integral part of everything we do. Thank you for that, Carrie. I appreciate it. And again, thank you to the entire Oak Creek staff. IT guy back there, nice job. Doug, thanks for showing up. Do appreciate it. Lori, everybody. So. Great, thanks. Motion to adjourn, somebody.
Siebert moves to adjourn the meeting at 8:47.
Oracle second.
Roll call, and I forgot where we were, so Christine, you want to do it?
Hannah, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Hold on, aye. Sleeper, aye.
Campbell, aye.
Great, thank you all.